order a special meeting of the El Segundo City Council, Tuesday, July 11th. Please rise, and Mona Schilling will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Perstag. Here. Councilmember Brand.
Present.
Councilmember Dugan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles. Okay. And Mayor Fuentes.
Here. Now is the time for public communication related to city business only. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes per person, 30 minutes total. Seeing no public communications, we will close. Special order of business. Consideration and possible action regarding the strategic planning workshop resulting in City Council receiving and filing of staff's discussion, analysis, and recommendations for the fiscal year 2017-18 strategic plan in preparation for the fiscal year 27-18 budget. Jan.
Little technical problem.
We're good.
Everything is fine.
Where are we on the agenda? Is it the welcome?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, so we'll begin with the welcome by the mayor. Thank you for everybody who's here to participate in our strategic planning. We have the departments in town represented, as well as the council and our city clerk as our treasurer here. I don't see her. This is very exciting. We have Jan, who's going to lead us in this workshop today when her equipment is...
We can fill.
Yes, we can. So, and I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
That was good. That was really good.
Couple of quick reminders. Please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent. Second is that one of our strategic objectives is to upgrade the audio visual in this room, but until we do that, these are live microphones. So that the microphones are on at all times. Those are the housekeeping pieces. Jan, we're going to take a break about halfway through, right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. By way of welcome and introduction, the city has done strategic planning before. And oftentimes, especially during the recession, it was really a staff-driven process that was focused more on 1 year and getting by with limited resources for that 1 year. And we asked council to adopt those, and we use them internally as evaluation tools throughout the year. Last year, we took a very different approach and a very helpful approach, and that was to start over and to focus on mission, goals, and then objectives and a work program that was a much more collaborative effort involving council members, a couple of you who were relatively new at that period of time, and we developed a very good product that served us well throughout the year, and we're going to go through it in some detail. But I think today is really about building on that effort from last year and improving on it. We've brought Jan Perkins in, who's with Management Partners. The council has met Jan via interviews. But for those of you that aren't familiar with Jan or Management Partners, they do strategic evaluation, consulting, assistance with municipal governments throughout the state of California. They're very high regarded. Jan will add to what I'm about to say, but she comes with a number of decades of municipal experience as a city manager in a couple of different cities, and primarily Northern California, right? And is very familiar with the issues throughout the state that we're dealing with. She's going to remind us of how we're similar to some of those other cities and how we maybe are a little bit different.
Yeah.
What else should I cover, Jen?
No, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually the technology was working 100% perfectly. I ran through the entire PowerPoint. Everything was perfect until just this second. So I have no idea what happened. There's a gremlin in this room. I don't know, but we will get it working. Hey, okay, let's see now. Let's run through it.
Perfect timing.
Oh, look, see, beautiful pictures. They're working. All right. Okay, good. Okay, we've already heard. So I'm sorry for that little disruption at the beginning, but now we have it working, and we've spent some time, staff and I, in putting this together. We have a lot of good information to convey, but more than anything, my role today is to work with the City Council and the staff and members of the public here in talking about your future. And the intent today is not for decisions to be made, but for there to be conversation, and yet decisions to be made and consensus next on August 8th, which is the next session. So I'm going to go through the agenda for today and also the agenda for August 8th, because sometimes I think it's helpful to understand not only what we're going to do today, but what we're going to do both days, and then understand what we're expected to finish with by the end of the second day. So today, I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview of strategic planning. It's terrific that the city started with a strategic plan last year, and now you have a multi-year strategic plan. That's the hardest thing, is to get started, and you have done that, and it has a lot in it. And now you're at the point of being able to refine that, which is what happens in a good strategic plan. You work on it, you continue to refine it every year. Then we're going to spend just a few minutes reflecting on the accomplishments of the city over the last year or so, including progress on your strategic plan. And as council members know, I had an opportunity to interview each one of you, and I asked you what you thought were some key accomplishments of the city, and I have consolidated that information, and it's available in a packet, and I'll walk through that packet. And we're going to reflect on that just a little bit. Then in the PowerPoint, we have a number of slides. In the strategic planning vein, it's important to think about the context that the city of El Segundo finds itself in. You have your local context, but you live within the region, within the state, and within a national context, for that matter. So we've prepared a number of slides to provide a larger context just for reflection purposes. So as you think about your priorities for the coming year or several years, there may be some things in these slides that trigger your thoughts about, oh, we should be thinking about X, Y, or Z. So that's the purpose of those slides, and we'll have an opportunity to hear some comments about those. Then we have a few slides on your financial outlook, and your finance director and city manager will be presenting those, because of course any good strategic plan and set of priorities is grounded in fiscal reality. So we will have some discussion about that. Then next on the agenda, we'll spend just a little bit of time on your top 5 general goals. Last year you established 5 broad goals in your strategic plan. And any exercise with a strategic plan is an opportunity to affirm them or to modify those. So this would be an opportunity to hear from council members in particular whether you think that they are still inclusive enough or whether there may be some modifications that would be warranted. Then we're going to spend a fair amount of time this afternoon beginning to walk through and discuss a priorities worksheet, and I'll explain that when we get to that point. It has been distributed, and we have extra copies of that. The discussion today is not intended to result in any decisions today, but rather to seek understanding and to seek clarifications. And then we will wrap up today at 4:30, by 4:30, and by that point we will have had a good understanding of those priorities, and then we will talk about the August 8th strategic planning session, where there will be a consensus of the council and direction of the council determined. So then the August 8th agenda, just as an overview, I've really already hit on a number of these highlights. We'll do certainly a recap of today, what came out of today. We will hear council direction on the priorities for next fiscal year, an overview of the preliminary budget. We're not going to be getting into the budget per se today, just a very high-level overview of the multi-year forecast. But on August 8th, you will have an overview of that preliminary budget. And then the staff is interested in council feedback on categories of allocating some general fund reserve dollars that may be available. So we will have some information available for the council and seeking your feedback so the staff can then prepare the budget with that feedback in mind. And then toward the end of the day on the 8th, I'm going to facilitate a discussion among the council about, now that you've provided direction on your priorities, how are you going to stay focused on those? Because it's important to have your priorities and then make sure that during the course of the year, except for emergencies, of course, that come up, that you stay focused on those and that you don't allow a lot of other things to pile on that might take you away from those priorities. So we're going to have a conversation about what it would mean and what it would look like to actually stay focused on those priorities and how you'll deal with new things that do come up. And then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps that the staff will be doing. And then at the end of this, I will be preparing a report, and I hope that will provide some direction for the city council and the staff in moving forward. So that's the game plan. Are there any questions about that game plan? Okay. So today, I think I've already gone through this probably enough on today's objectives. Just a few ground rules for the day. I always offer a few things. So among the council and the staff, I certainly encourage everyone to engage fully as we move through the day and listen to each other and seek to understand questions and points of view. Seeking consensus, that's among the council, and that's really more for the next session. And staying focused, and that's my job as a facilitator to help everyone stay focused so that we can be finished by 4:30, and I do make sure that we end on time. And then certainly enjoy the afternoon. I will be maintaining a bike rack. I have it right over here. And the bike rack will be for things that may come up during the course of the conversation that we really will not have time to talk about today, but should be noted for a future discussion, either at the council level or perhaps there may be something that the staff needs to follow up on. So whatever it is, I'll put that on the bike rack. It's really a time management tool. So now I just want to share a few slides on what is strategic planning and why even do it. You certainly know this because you have a strategic planning. But just to set the framework of it, a strategic plan and say success, and I like to think the end in mind is not a strategic plan. The end in mind is a better El Segundo. That's why you do it. And so how you get there is by having your clear goals and making sure that they're the right goals, having achievable priorities, having the right number so that you are ambitious enough, but not having so many that you don't get them done. Having effective day-to-day operations, making sure that your departments are staffed so that, and resourced so that they can do those. And then that's how you get to a better El Segundo. And then just in terms of the framework for a strategic plan, you have all of these in your strategic plan. You have a vision. Let's see if I can, oops, here we go. And here's your vision, where big ideas take off, and it's a hub for innovation. And I lost a little graphic that was on that. I wonder what happened. There's something in the translation here, I think. The mission, you have a mission statement, and that's, did that come up? Yeah, we're having a little, there's the mission statement. Provide a great place to live, work, and visit. The thing I like about your mission statement and your vision is that they're short enough to be remembered. Sometimes vision statements and mission statements are so long that you can't remember them. And the value in having something short enough is that everybody should be on the same page and you can remember them, you can state them, and you can use those on a regular basis. You have a set of values. The values are important to state because those should drive behaviors within an organization. And And yeah, we're still having a bit of a problem with this. Here they are. And I have a graphic over there, but it has disappeared somehow. I think we may want to take a couple of minute break and fix some of this, because I think it's going to affect some of the other slides. But in any event, just to wrap this part up, the values that you've identified are clear, and you don't have too many of them. Because sometimes I've seen a list of 15 values, and people can barely count to 5 when it comes to remembering things, but you have a nice set of values in the 7. And you have 5 clear goals, and these goals are pretty ambitious, but they're clear. And you can set your priorities so that they achieve these goals. And again, the nice thing about having 5 is that they are memorable, and they are ones that are all encompassing and are ones that you can measure whether or not you've made progress. And then the strategies. The strategies are really the priorities, and that's in the long strategic plan document that you have a lot of strategies in there. And as you're going through refinement of your strategic plan, that's the area that you'll probably want to improve as you go through, because there's just a lot there. And making sure that you have the right number of strategies, that you have resources to accomplish, and that way you can really measure whether or not you're succeeding in reaching your goals. And then in this slide, the council and the staff both have critical roles in setting your strategic plan. The council's role is in setting the vision, in setting your mission as well, setting the key goals and the policy priorities. And then you rely on your professional staff to set the departmental strategies. How is the city going to achieve those goals over the 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and longer? And how are the implementation steps going to be determined, and working with staff at the line level, how are you actually going to be successful in carrying out the goals? So the complementary relationship between policy and implementation is critical to success in any strategic plan. Okay, well, the graphics are still up on that one. So just in terms of the strategic planning framework, let me just pause there for a moment and ask for any observations or comments that you'd like to make, anyone from the council or the staff, about the process that the strategic plan that you have, and the process that you have already started. Any comments?
I'll break the ice by saying it was a good start. I think we're still fine-tuning how much the level of work that we gave ourselves. Is it the right amount? Do we have the resources to carry those things out throughout the year, or do some of those things need to be moved on to future years? Mm-hmm. The KPI component of that, we're starting to establish a baseline. It's getting more robust.
For the public, you may want to say what KPI is.
The key performance indicators, or metrics that we're reporting on monthly. I think we're still trying to figure out the best way of reporting that information. Mm-hmm. And then finally, the work program component we're reporting on a quarterly basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other comments? Yes, Carol.
My comment is I'm excited to see that the city is moving in this direction. Strategic planning is not just a thing that you do, it's a culture change, there's a shift in how you think, and we constantly have to be reevaluating what we're doing, plan for our future, as well as have reflection on what's happening so that we can continue to mold the city as we see fit, and how, as stewards of the city, we need to make sure we're driving the train, not just letting it happen. So I'm pleased that everyone's engaged, and I thank everybody in advance for their time, because I know it's above and beyond it seems it's above and beyond your workday, but it will really drive your workday in the future. So I'm hoping that we constantly, as we continue to do these, this becomes a cultural shift in that we look forward to doing these strategic plans, because it's really setting our goals and where we're driving our departments forward in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just an exercise.
It's not just an
and
exercise.
That's important. Yes.
Yeah, well, Greg touched on it, but the missing part for me is
I don't think we can look to any one of the 5 strategic objectives and know whether or not we're achieving our objective. And I think we've done a good job of starting to figure out what key performance indicators to track. We've got a baseline of a few months. There's some improvements that need to be made there. It's progress, don't get me wrong, but we're a year in. We have those 5 objectives. We've been working towards them, but from a quantifiable standpoint, I think it would be hard to say we have actually achieved these 5 things, and to what degree. So what I'm looking forward to, and Greg already touched on this, is kind of the next iteration, which is we've truly narrowed down our objectives to a couple key metrics, and we're constantly looking to those to say, are we moving the dial or not? To what degree? And that everybody is acutely focused on those things. Because to your point, there's a lot there right now.
Yeah.
There are many strategies, many KPIs,
Yeah.
but we really don't need to be focused on all of those probably.
Yeah, and that's actually a very common thing in a first strategic plan is to put a lot into it and then to sort through as to what's most meaningful in terms of measurement. And you should really be measuring what you're going to improve. So you're counting, you're measuring what you're going to be using for your decision making and then improvements. Or you also might be measuring what you want to report to the public. Some indicators that are important there. But it's not unusual to have a lot of those to start with, and then you can begin to narrow so that they're the most meaningful ones. Yeah, Carol.
Well, I'm hoping with this process that we're identifying that the KPIs are there to help us attain these goals and objectives. So the KPIs should be helping change policy or practice within our organization so that we can attain the goals. So the KPIs are not the end result. KPIs are just they expose some of the opportunities you have in your teams, your departments, so that we can work on them and attain our goals and objectives.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Other comments?
I think what you said about you can't boil the ocean, and KPIs can change as we fine tune.
Yes.
And if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and we might start measuring some things, and then we might see that we have those under control, and we might want to move on, or something may spring up that we need to focus our attention on.
Yeah, it's important to view it as an improvement process. Yeah, good. Okay, great. Okay, so I'd like to reflect a little bit on the past before we think about the future. And in doing that, I'd like to draw your attention to the handout that has been provided, and it looks like this. Everybody should have one of these. And the particular pages that I would like to draw your attention to are numbered in the back, starting on page 9. And at the top, it says highlights of accomplishments and progress on strategic plan. It's actually numbered page 9 at the bottom of that packet. So. And the first page, or page 9, has the highlights of city accomplishments that were noted by council members. So when I conducted my interviews, I just asked the simple question, what are some of the accomplishments of the city of El Segundo over the last year or so? Not to put any strict definition of the time frame, but the year or two. And that's what the first page is. And then starting on the next page is from the staff is a progress report on the strategic plan and the 5 broad goals that were established by the City Council last year. And that's sort of a synthesis of the key things that have moved forward since last year. And we'd like to get some reflections on this progress from a couple of different vantage points. One is, do you have any other items that you think should be added? And that's always an important question. But more importantly, what contributed to the success? Because it's helpful to know what caused you to be successful. So as we plan the priorities for the next year, you can keep those success factors in mind. I had actually hoped that we could be in some small groups and I could have some small groups talk about that because it's helpful to do that. But since we're in this sort of a setting, I would like to ask if we could at least have people maybe in groups of 3 or 4 talk among yourselves just for a few minutes and then share with the entire group what you consider to be the key factors for success in moving forward in these accomplishments on both the top page noted by council members and the following pages that were developed by staff. And to do that, you'll have to move your chairs around just a tiny bit. So that would be maybe the 4 of you here, and maybe the 4 of you here, and the 4 of you, and the 4 of you. Isn't that convenient? 4s and 4s. So just give you each about 5 minutes or so.
And just for members of the public that might be here, members of the public can move around and join any group that they want to. The council still is subject to the Brown Act, so we should still make this as public as possible. So if you're going to be discussing city business, members of the public can also participate in those discussions.
We'll have everybody report all of their ideas back to the entire group.
Now that we're wired up and ready to go, we can go talk. Is that what we're doing?
Remember, your microphones are on.
So the factors that led to our being able to
Success,
achieve these things
yes.
over the last year.
Right.
The strategy was pretty, not pretty influential.
So it starts with the workforce, really, right? The people that do the work.
It does, but I think the key component is
Can you just
getting
reiterate
leadership.
our objective? We're trying to,
The brokers, but there's
we're discussing.
Identify the factors contributing to the city's success in carrying these out. No, in carrying these out. Over the last year, reflecting on.
So it's a reflection.
Yeah, it's a
So what did we
reflection.
do in the
suggested or mine?
Oh, yeah.
We all got our stuff down. All those bullets, the 5 of us put together.
So then what are some of the reasons or factors that contributed to those accomplishments? Probably, one that comes to mind, I don't know if I can find an example, but just collaboration in general and the utilization of council and staff, but also committees that have been created. I think really made some progress on collaborating with stakeholders.
e-newsletter.
Did it get you thinking of what I could do?
You got a few things written down? No, a little more globally.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of it as committees being part of it, but just collaboration. You know? I mean, nobody did this alone. You know?
Right. Through the vehicles of the committee, we created a forum where people could start to talk about. Like at the end of the day, the art.
I would say that adding school C's, particularly starting with this sheet, 16, 17 budget. All departments increased their travel training.
Art museums, we didn't have that so readily available to us.
Right.
So, I think it helps stimulate the conversation around those topics, where before it would have just been staff and council's ideas. It got enriched.
Yep.
We haven't, I think we've only scratched the surface of what that's doing. And we're talking about it, right? KPI, we're just learning how to do it, what does it mean, how does it
If you change your, like, after
If you have legislation that
processes or
changes,
I think
practices of your
having this
department
in my case, you know,
to align with the
GASB
goals and
pronouncements
objectives.
change it, you gotta.
not yet.
reason why we're able to be successful in accomplishing some of those things is identifying those work plan objectives and specific tasks.
Provided a focus that should be needed when you get two council majority all in one fell swoop. And so on the financials. DM or the school superintendent, you appreciate that.
Spending, right? So, we're starting to look at it.
Yeah, I think, like I said that one night, that might be the biggest thing I do on council is to form that group and to come up with some ways we can lessen the damage to the city. I think it's a big one, yeah, the can got kicked down the road too many decades. And future councils will
Do
thank
you know
us
what worries me,
for
like my biggest worry right now?
beginning to deal
The
with
city
it.
is
I mean,
that
would you, I would even say, you know,
we're on a very pivotal point where
Well, I mean,
That's
we've
my
already,
optimism,
we've already done one
that our
thing by paying off
practices and our policies are
annual
policies
last
are
meeting
antiquated as a result of it.
all at once early
Yet,
and save
we're
that
gonna be
record.
infusing new
that's
technology,
gonna
but before you use new technology,
Yeah, well,
you
it's
really
certainly
should
on
be
the list
assessing your
of-
policies
Yeah.
and
The
One
tip
of
of
the
the
things-
iceberg,
Yes,
absolutely.
oh yeah, and it's on your priority
But
list for the future.
we are so,
So what,
like,
so take a look at the, like the next
constantly
page and just kind of
renewing
stay at
and
the global
upgrading
level of, because you've already identified a few of the
now we're
factors
going
that have been
here,
helpful
donations here,
in being
and I
successful.
don't
What,
think we're
and you've got a lot of
to
progress.
change your, to change your.
It's a pretty impressive list, really, of items. So just looking at those globally, what I heard was maybe the fact that you had some council's consensus on direction if you had your strategic plan. So,
I mean, I think that the work of staff has to.
Right.
and the
get
work of
going
staff,
on
certainly.
this,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Exactly. What,
How would we do it?
how should it look like?
With the technology of today and tomorrow.
And then you look at the data you need and you process flow it.
Right. That's a huge undertaking, and
That's been a real focus.
I want to make sure we have the resources to do that, or that they have the time to do it, because
People to
that's on
talk
top
about
of the regular.
milestones
Do you know what I
and
mean?
to
That's like some
celebrate
project, that's some kind of
brought people together.
mapping.
You know, the people
Exactly.
who coming down here to get the historical pictures from the history room.
Yeah, but you know, you see where I'm going, like, I feel,
Collections they
I'm
found in
worried
their closets
that
and
we're
garages.
so either
That
understaffed
didn't happen in year 97 and I'm thinking,
don't have the knowledge
got
and
us
know
together.
that we're just gonna replicate what we do here.
Okay, well, so the factor that I'm kind of hearing underlying that is having events that
I mean,
bring
you're
people
one-
together is a factor in itself to success. And so you might just make a note of that because there's some real value in bringing people together. So, and you did that, it sounds like.
Yeah, people have participated in greater
Right.
numbers than
Right, right.
before around the friends, the history committee.
Right.
Right, yeah, you can
Okay. So take about 5 more minutes and then we'll hear what all the groups think. Okay, just need a few factors. We're going to take just 5 more minutes, so just write a few factors down and we'll have everybody share.
Thank you.
I think going forward,
So I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes and everybody's going to share all their notes.
Yeah,
going forward, having major locality.
right, and change.
Oops, just dropping at 5 minutes and then we'll have everybody share.
Help your shop, street improvements, that's all projects.
Being in the recession environment, compared to being in an environment where you can make decisions and where you put some resources, it's a completely different mindset. It's much more positive to serve. We're not
Can't always get everything.
that's the blessing to get to that point and be able to prioritize what can bring back.
How much money, from your perspective, how much money do you think we need on an annual basis?
Yeah, and some of the graphics just disappeared from
To
it.
get caught up to a point where we start spending like $750.
Okay, maybe we'll.
So then we're gonna get there.
Point, but I don't know what happened.
SB1,
It was working because I went through
eventually
it when I got here.
bring it about $700 to $750.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was working, but I went through every single slide and all
So
the
we just need
graphics
to
were
make
there.
sure we're using that money wisely so that we're targeting the change that we really should be targeting.
So there's incremental increases.
I think it's kind of what I applied when I was
So it's like 3 cents this year, 4 cents.
Well, there's certain phases of it, like our car regulations are going to be increasing next year.
Okay, have you got enough written down? You can share your brilliant words of wisdom?
No emission fees, yeah, those are already phased in.
Okay, get ready.
See these increases. So it's going to be about 700.
Right, that's good. So that was actually.
Somebody's writing stuff down, right?
Yes.
Okay, okay, all right.
And there's lots of opportunities and not all of them.
Right.
You think you have
So
enough brilliant words written down?
Gave you the impression that we were innovative
Yes.
and open to change.
Okay, well, come on back and we'll share everything.
concerted effort to
All
let
right.
outsiders know that we had a ministry. There was a you can see bands and stuff on anything.
Okay, we're going to hear what the small groups identified as key factors of success. So which group would like to start?
Mayor.
Okay.
Well, I was
Mayor.
just gonna,
And I'm going to write them down.
Okay. Two of the things that were told to us is one of the differences. We have working department heads who roll up their sleeves, and so they're involved in it. But the other thing that was very interested, before we do too big of a victory lap around the building, is we had departments who weren't included in this. In all the discussions and the offsites, the clerks and the treasurer weren't brought into this, and they're very important departments, and they also have each an elected representative.
Okay. So I'm going to start a list over here of consider other factors. For the future. Okay, all right, that's,
And there was one other success factor in that council and the city manager weren't afraid to cast a wide net to find good candidates for positions all over.
okay.
includes the prior council as well.
Okay, good, very good. All right. Good notes. Same group.
I spoke to, on the financial side of the house, and I'm sure this is a difficult political approach, but the council wasn't afraid to identify new revenue streams, and they, the TOT that was put on the ballot, which ultimately passed, created new revenue streams where we otherwise wouldn't have. It allows us to do things like improve our infrastructure and buy equipment that's been needing for replacement and having money for technology. And again, it's a balancing act to maintain your business-friendly approach, but also identify new revenue streams that help us to operate day to day.
Okay, good. Important success factor. Very good. Okay. Next group. Who was the scribe in that group over
I was
there?
the scribe.
Meredith?
The creation of the work plan and strategic plan, just in general, was a really good guidepost, I think, so that we all knew sort of where we were going and what those goals were for the last year. But beyond that, what it did was really opened up communication and collaboration efforts among the city council, the staff, but also probably more importantly, community members and stakeholders. And as Councilmember Dugan stated, it really, we have a bigger sort of willingness to solicit and receive input, and that really helps pinpoint, I think, maybe where some of the focus should be on the staff's part. So, did I say that right?
Very good.
And then the other thing that we talked about quite a bit was sort of that feeling and experience that the Centennial celebration has created, and and it's events that bring people together. It's not just the events itself, but just the fact that people are celebrating the city and really looking back on the accomplishments and achievements from the history, starting thinking in a forward future progress sort of way. And it's really changed, not that specifically, but just in general, I think the mindset has changed on the way that people within the city are thinking.
Great. Carol?
So we had two different views. One from someone that had been in the department for a long time, the city for a long time, and the view was that the strategic plan really helped give them a roadmap, as Meredith said, to what the city council wanted as far as the vision, so that they actually could identify attainable goals and objectives within their own department. So it really forced or encouraged them to really take a hard look at their department and identify opportunities to align with the goals and objectives of the city. And then from a new employee's perspective, when the person was looking to accept a position at El Segundo, they recognized and saw that we had a strategic plan, and that strategic plan gave them insight into who we were as an organization, and saw that we were innovative and open to change, which attracted them to our city.
Yeah, no, that's really an important factor, because people are looking for a place to work, and they want to work for a place that's innovative. Having a strategic plan is an important factor. Good. Okay, great. Those are very good factors. Okay. Last but not least, who is the scribe over here?
I'll focus on what we have that's not already up there.
Okay.
As far as what contributed to our success and our accomplishments over the last year, starts with people and the workforce and especially the department heads. We have joined us in the last year or who really sort of matured into their roles in the last year. Ken, Lynn, Bill's just started a week ago, Joe, and Chris as department heads, and they've added a great deal of consistency, stability in the executive team, leadership, but also a great deal of collaboration. As we saw in the offsite that we did with the department heads a couple weeks ago. We've had a lot of success and continue to have success around public works projects, capital projects, and that was all based on decisions that council was asked to make a couple of years ago about staffing up in engineering and developing a full project management staff in public works that can handle multiple projects at the same time, and we're able to, we've increased our capacity there and are successfully running through projects, including Richmond Street, which was both a successful, I think, example of planning, decision-making, and community involvement for the Richmond Street renovation project and address some of our liability issues. We've made some investments in technology which have helped certain departments. We have a long ways to go. But we've automated some processes already with the hotels, for instance, being able to pay their TOT online for the first time, and hopefully we'll automate the business license process before this year end. We've increased our training budgets in every department. We'd cut way back during the recession on available funds for training, and we've increased those budgets so our employees are benefiting, and the city and our services are benefiting from increased training. A lot of pre-planning around the centennial, and we've had a number of successful events and have more planned. We've generally increased outreach and surveying. We are using social media, SurveyMonkey, the farmers market, and various tools to increase the amount of surveying and public input. Is the marijuana survey still out? For instance, as a current survey that we have out there, and we surveyed around a number of other topics. Around our financial situation, we've been very disciplined as an organization throughout the recession in the last few years about spending. And the department heads do an excellent job every year of coming in at or under budget. The council has increased our reserves, so we've been very disciplined there. And Measure B passed, which was mentioned, but also we had a wave of hotel development, which helped certainly with the TOT increase. And economic development in general, particularly out in Rosecrans and aviation, we're seeing quite a bit there at Campus El Segundo. We were successful in reaching settlement with Wiseburn a number of years ago, which has the aquatics facility now under construction. It's going to be the nicest one in Southern California and is about a year away. And my other items we've covered, so that's our list.
So in looking at those, it seems like there are several themes that emerge from those success factors having to do with council decisions, some new people, collaboration, involving the community, fiscal restraint, responsibility, increasing revenue, allocating resources so you can actually get some things done. And providing opportunities for the community to be involved. I heard a lot about the centennial. It sounds like it was quite a fun time. So keeping those things in mind and as we move forward into the next year will be important. So are there, in reflecting upon those success factors, did anything come to mind for any of you that you want to keep in mind as we move forward in thinking about future priorities? Some factors that we want to build on. Is there anything else that's an important thing to consider for the future? Or just reinforcing more of those of the same?
We have some critical vacancies still to fill.
Oh, okay.
We need to fill out the rest of the workforce and one more department head position.
Okay. So just making sure you have the resources you need to do those things. Okay, good.
And we need to continue to watch we're going to talk about it in greater detail, but we need to continue to watch our financial situation.
We'll definitely do that. Yeah, good.
I keep thinking about making sure that whatever we're doing keeps getting tied back to are we a great place to live or work or visit, right? And that's the one thing that keeps rolling through my head is do all these things help us become a greater place to survive as a community here.
Well, and that's your mission. So you stay focused on that mission. Yeah.
hopefully these accomplishments are aimed in the right direction, I guess is my comment there. So.
Yeah. Great place to live,
Great man.
work, and visit. So, good.
Can I just,
Yes,
I'd
please.
like to make an observation about what I think is missing.
Okay,
To be
good.
not a pessimist, but to Mike's point, it triggered my thought. We hope we're pointing in the right direction in terms of the objectives. And to me, the two missing components, based on our 5 strategic objectives, are that we have not thoroughly surveyed our residents and businesses to understand what they truly want from us and what they think about us as a city, nor have we asked our employees the same question. So I know it's on the work plan, that it's coming, but to me, that needs to be a priority, both of those.
Okay, I captured the first one about thoroughly surveying our
Just
residents
the
and then
residents,
asking.
businesses, and the employees, because we
Oh,
want
I
to
see.
be an employer of
Okay.
choice.
Okay. And businesses. Yeah. Mhm. Yes, Carol?
And then for me, it would be, I know we're on the precipice, I'm hoping, of major technology change. I want to make sure that when we go to these changes, because it will be very dramatic for many departments, because we're so behind on so many departments, that we're constantly not just replicating what we have, but we're looking at where we should be going and redesigning and reprocessing before we do implementation of a new software or technology. Because the technology is not the answer. The technology is should just be the driver of your process change, not just the change.
Right.
It's not, technology is not the answer, it's the tool.
Important tool, yes.
I would mention just, we have a long work plan and, how to prioritize that and maybe a further conversation about what resources are needed to accomplish those. And, if you take resources from one place to put it towards another, what are those implications and what, there's going to be impacts one way or the other depending on how things are prioritized, and I think that needs to be part of the conversation.
There is a finite amount of resource. And so if you have a long list and you just say, do it without having the proper resources, things do fall off. They just fall off the list. Yeah. Yes, Don?
Well, let's back up. I think Drew was talking about surveying also the employees. Let's pick that up. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, residents, businesses, and employees, all of those. Yeah, got it. Okay, good. Okay, well, as we move through today and the 8th of August, we will keep these factors in mind. That's the reason that we go through this exercise at the beginning, so that as we develop the priorities, we don't forget what caused you to be successful or some of the things that you need to keep in mind. So let's see if I can get this to work. So let's see here. I'm going to move on to, okay, so I'm going to go through a series of slides, and then I'll pause at the end of this series of slides and hear some comments, and maybe it will provoke some observations from council members or from staff. So feel free to, take any notes, and I think you have copies of this in front of you. So a lot of these you'll be very familiar with, and so I'm not really presenting most of this as new information, but rather just as context to think about the next several years as you are developing out your strategic plan. Of course, you know that the population is changing in California and in Los Angeles County, so this is no news. It's going to get bigger, and the ethnic composition is changing, and that's no news. What is a sort of a newer factor to be keeping in mind is the age change in California and the age change in Los Angeles County. I mean, we picked this, we don't have it for your community in particular, and maybe you can get that somehow, but we were able to get that for the county. But you can see within the next, well, not even 30 years, 25 years, you're going to go from basically 5%, 5% of the population in the year 2010 was 75 years of older, and by 2040 will be 15% of the population in Los Angeles County will be 75 years of age or older. The age category of 60 to 74 is also growing, and the younger age is diminishing. And that has some pretty big implications for all kinds of city services that are provided. And so we'll think about that as we get down to the last slide and we talk about what these things might mean for your local services. Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to point out that it's interesting that it stops at 75 plus. 2040, there'll be 90 plus.
Well, that's a good
It's already
point.
happening.
And in fact, the fastest, and we should do this next time we do the slide, that the fastest demographic in terms of growth is like 90 and 95 plus. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. So we'll do that next time. We'll add that one on. So this is just shows what's happened over the last several years. Again, this is no surprise. Unemployment was very high a few years ago. It's not now. California's had a huge unemployment rate a few years ago during the recession, and Los Angeles County actually mirrored the state's unemployment, and of course, unemployment is very low right now. It's down to about 4% in Los Angeles County. Income inequality, that's a factor that we're really looking at now as we do these slides all over the state. In terms of that on a statewide basis, California is the 7th most unequal in terms of income inequality in the country, and Los Angeles County is among the top 2%. So that's a lot of rich and a lot of very low income. So it's the distance between the upper income and the lower income. Real earnings for workers are expected to rise in California. That's continuing to go up. Los Angeles County is just simply mirroring what's happening in the state. This, to me, is one of the most interesting slides. The millennials are going to rule the world in about 3 years, and this actually is a national slide. We don't have this for Los Angeles County yet, but by 2020, and I don't know how many in this room are millennials, but but there are a few millennials here. Millennials on this slide, so millennials were born between 1981 and 1997. Okay, but it's interesting because there's some different needs and interests, both from a community planning point of view, what people want in terms of lifestyle, housing choices, job choices. There are some factors that are different for millennials, and so it's just something that cities are starting to think about. So instead of planning for maybe the way things used to be, plan for how things may be in the future in terms of your workforce. Now, the demographics in terms of the number of people, that can be, that's a factor you're going to have to think about. Who's going to actually be living here, and who do you want to be attracting to live in your community?
Jim, before you move on, this something I've experienced myself as a department head. Under millennials, the second bullet point, view work as an expression of themselves. They're very vocal about that. So I find that very, since I'm a Gen X, and I've, come from a very traditional upbringing, so I find that very challenging sometimes as a department head. But I think we need to get used to that and adjust to that because there are going to be more and more millennials coming into the workforce.
Yeah. And I think as I've given this presentation and as a firm, as we've done some work in this area, there's no right or wrong. We're not trying to say that the baby boomers have a lock on how to do things better than Gen Xers or millennials. The key is trying to understand what are the values and what's the work that needs to get done, and having something like your strategic plan with a set of values that are very clear that everybody can rally around. That's one of the best ways to have a workforce where everybody is in alignment. But it is important just to understand that things are shifting. And so the next slide shows your city workforce as it is now. So you can see that you're predominantly Gen X, which is not surprising. Those are the people in terms of ages about 37 to 52. I did the math on that, and that makes sense. Those are the people that are well into their careers in the workforce. But you've got quite a few millennials there. You got some baby boomers, and they're going to be retiring over the coming years. And so what are the implications then for how you will be staffing, how you're going to be working? And so it is just important to be mindful of understanding the variations in your workforce. And then competition for skilled employees, I think this is private and public sector, but specifically for city government, is pretty keen. And sometimes that can be surprising for people who are not in city government to know that it's not that easy to recruit for some positions. But we work all over the state of California, and these are some of the positions that are particularly difficult to recruit for. Certainly at the executive level, it can be difficult. And part of the factor is housing. Housing prices are so high that it's really difficult to get people to move, and they're not necessarily going to want to commute an hour and a half or 2 hours. So it's challenging to recruit people at that executive level. Police officers, that's all over the state, big problem. Engineers, planners, those are also very, very difficult to recruit for. Finance and HR. So some of the positions you might not think are difficult to recruit for, they just are. I'm constantly in contact with people from other cities. I call up, do you know anybody who might be interested in finance director or finance manager or whatever? So,
Any of your client cities doing anything particularly creative or innovative?
Well, they're all trying to do everything they possibly can. A lot of personal contacts, a lot of use of recruiters, and the recruiters are all really busy actually with that. One of the things that cities are doing, and this certainly is an important practice, is you mentioned training. Cities are getting their employees involved in professional development. They're involved in the professional organizations. And so what that does is not only train up their own employees, but it also puts the city in contact with other professionals in other organizations. And it helps those professionals see that, say, El Segundo would be a great place to work. But that networking is really key. But it's challenging.
You make the statement that we're competing in a smaller talent pool here, and there's record numbers of people with college degrees now, and that number gets bigger and bigger every day. So we're not growing the talent pool, or
Okay.
Are we missing a gap here? Am I missing something?
People are, over the last about 15 years, there have been fewer people wanting to go into local government. They're going into the nonprofit sector. They're going into private sector. Some of the dissonance about government in general, and just sort of the bad rap that the government in general has been taken, has actually really affected the desire of young people to go into local government. And so one of the things that many of the local government professional organizations are doing, whether it's the public works directors or city managers, they're really working with the colleges and encouraging them to help young people know that local government is an important place to work. We do really important work at this level, but it's a smaller group. People out of college want to go in, if they are interested in public service, they're much more interested in the nonprofit sector. And so we really are competing in a smaller pool.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I've got just a few slides here as a highlight as to how fast things are changing. Again, you know all of this, so it's not that it's new information to you, But who ever heard of Airbnb till just, it just popped up a few years ago. Uber, Lyft, those just popped up a few years ago. And if somebody had said, you can call up, well, not call up, just on my phone and, get a car, within 5 minutes to go someplace with some stranger, who's going to take, I would have said, you're crazy. But, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And so that is having major impacts on the rental car business, on, all kinds of transportation, advanced technology. So certainly you have your own technology investments that you need to do and that you've talked about. And I certainly heard in my interviews with city council members and discussions with staff. But the technology revolution will continue, and self-driving cars, I'm all for it. But whoever would have thought that is something that would be something that we would really be talking about, and we are. Artificial intelligence sounds like science fiction to me, but it's happening, and particularly in the area of law, they're using a lot of AI and in legal services and health services and so forth. So there's just a lot of tools, and it's not that local government is going to be adopting these tools, but you're right here next to LAX. You have already attracted some pretty interesting new companies, so you may be in a position to capitalize on some of these new technologies just because of where you are. So, and then, of course, things are changing. We're warmer, we're drier, we have a lot more fires. They're going on right now in California, and I'm sure that the fire department is affected because you probably send crews off to CAL FIRE, I imagine. Yep, sure. And hopefully you'll get reimbursed. Sea level rise, studies from the U.S. Geological Survey on that, and that's something that may very well impact any of us along the shore earlier than we thought it might. Those are just issues. The revenue gap, a few years ago, we were in a recession. We had a big revenue gap in many cities because of PERS increases that are now really growing again after a few years of sort of leveling out a little bit. That's going to continue to really be a major impact for cities and counties, for that matter. This slide was put together by one of my colleagues in our firm. There's been a recession about every 7 to 10 years since 1927. It just happened. So, we're overdue for one now. Hopefully it won't come. Hopefully not. But there will be a recession. We just don't know when it's going to be. Hopefully not in a year or two, but we're overdue at this point. So it's just one of those things to be keeping in mind.
Jen, if I can make a comment on that.
Yeah.
Even though we may not have a recession this year or next year, a lot of cities, not particularly El Segundo, but a lot of cities do rely on sales tax, property tax heavily.
Good point.
And the sales tax model is really changing. It's not your traditional brick and mortar retail sales anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's right, and we're seeing all over the country closure of shopping centers too. And
we do. My business does. I mentioned this to a smaller subset, but we clean out probably 3 or 4 retail stores a week.
Wow.
Right now.
Okay.
In my hauling business.
Okay.
Which is great in the short term, really bad in the long term.
Absolutely.
And then, Amazon controls 50% of online transactions now. They just bought Whole Food. Everything's in the retail space is in flux.
Okay. Yeah.
BB just shut down all their stores, the retailer. There are others that have followed suit.
No, it seems like every week we're
Nike
reading.
decided to pull any shoes. They're going to sell only online.
Really?
And they're pulling all their shoes out of retailers.
Wow.
Well, it's also
Carol?
point out the companies that you were listing, like Uber, Airbnb, their workforce is very small.
Good point.
So these companies that are larging have small workforces.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a different business model altogether.
And the other thing with sales tax, what Joe and Drew were saying, is if the point of sale is in a city, you get the sales tax, but the way they distribute the sales tax now, where it's collected and gets distributed, doesn't necessarily go back to the point of sale.
Right.
So we're missing out on that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is such an important point to be mindful of. The model is changing, and so the way things have been just in sales tax distribution and having malls, that's not going to be the way it is 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And so constantly updating, planning for the future is going to be important. So that's really an important point. Yeah.
Jan,
Oh, yes, no, I'm
one
sorry.
thing I find inconsistent is the Great Recession lasted seemingly forever. It just was on and on and on.
Yeah.
And at some point, we started to talk about the new normal. It's a new normal. Just get used to it. It's not a downtime. It's just going to roll this way. Now we get into this unprecedented period of growth, longer than people expected it to be. I don't hear the new normal when applied to the growth model. I find that inconsistent.
Well, I think it's difficult to think that the growth is going to last forever just looking at the history, because there's been a recession about every, well, this 6.8 or 7 years, but every 7 to 10 years. And so it's not going to grow forever. There will be a downturn. Don't know when, how deep, and how long it will last. It would be nice to think that we could.
It will be followed by an upturn. That's
It
an
always
optimist
happens.
speaking.
It always happens. That's what that slide shows. There's always downs and always ups. Absolutely.
Speaking of the Great Recession, were you talking from experience there? I was trying to.
Yeah. Not depressed.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, we don't want to depress.
I was wondering.
So the next couple of slides just show the rising pension costs. We've been able to put El Segundos in here. We're doing this for all of our cities. The pension costs, both on the safety and the non-safety side, are simply increasing.
Sorry, if you could skip. So I think this is an important slide because
Okay,
this,
good.
this is projecting out, was it 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
And this is going to be a key driver in our expenditures moving forward. So in subsequent slide, there's going to be a 5-year forecast that we presented. And this is one of the main factors, the main driver of increasing costs to the city moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe, can you remind me what the age is, the average actuarial age, life expectancy?
That CalPERS uses.
So for men, I believe it was 82. For women, it was 84.
I thought it was high 70s, but okay.
That was one of the recent changes.
Okay, so
So
they go-
82 and 84,
Okay, that's good.
which still may not be high enough.
Well, I mean, we were just at the grand opening of CCS.
The
CSS.
only one who can say it.
And that billionaire is convinced he's going to cure cancer, at least have a treatment for it through vaccinations and T cells. And so, I mean, that's another kind of unknown, is that life expectancy the right number? Because that's a huge driver of our burden in the future.
Absolutely.
CalPERS is likely to change its assumptions again.
Yeah, yeah, as I get more information about what's actually happening. Yeah, good. Then another just factor that's happening all over California, actually all over the country, is just healthcare costs, and there's just so much uncertainty at the state and the national level about that we can expect the healthcare costs to continue to rise. They're not going to go down. And then just shifting federal policies, there's just a lot of uncertainties and just kind of all arenas, whether it's housing or energy or environment, there's lots of uncertainties there. So then just as a recap, the population is getting older. There are going to be fewer working adults per senior, so it's going to be fewer people working, supporting the people who are retired. Millennials are going to control the world, we know that. Climate change is going to create challenges for local governments in just a variety of ways. The sharing economy is going to grow, just the rapid pace of technology, and the key there for any local community is to figure out how do you harness what's best for you, and how do you take advantage of that, whether it's from an economic development point of view, from a jobs point of view, whatever it might be. income inequality and what that might mean for homelessness, housing crisis, and so forth. Revenue gaps, cities are competing in a smaller talent pool, and then just the unknown federal policy shifts and what those may mean for the city. So you're not alone. The city of El Segundo has good company, but you have some key positive factors. You're located next to an airport. You've got some exciting economic development things going on in your community, and so you can harness some of these factors in a positive way. So now just let me open it up for any discussion from council or staff about which ones of these really resonate with you, which you think are going to be important to think about for the future. Yes.
You know, I think going back to people being the greatest asset and our goal of developing as a choice employer as workforce, I think what I'm saying here, it just ties into everything. When you talk about people, process, procedures, having worked in the public and private sector, one of the toughest things to, I'll say, deal with in the public sector is your ability to change quickly. It just, there's a long process, and juxtapose that against the millennials coming in who, you know, I'm sure just like now I'm the old guy and every generation talks about the generation coming up as they're just instant gratification and want everything now and they deserve everything now. Recruiting, just getting those folks interested in government.
Yes.
When they want to do things like this, and we talk about technology, for example, that's going to be a pretty big frustration for them to tie in and recruit. And that affects everything.
Yeah. Well, that's really true. If you're trying to recruit millennials into positions, and if you don't have technology that they're used to, it can be a factor.
I'm excited to see what they do with it. You know, hey, you got a better idea, great. It's all yours now. Let's see what you do.
Right, exactly. Yes, Suzanne?
D, E, and F really strike me because the sharing economy, a lot of the sharing bypasses revenue sources. So the city doesn't benefit from that because it's almost underground.
Yeah.
And then income equality on the rise. I mean, I see that even in town with families being priced out of living here. And then the revenue gaps continuing with the pension and health care rising. I mean, that's been one of my priorities for 7 years now. There's not much a city can do to, I'm certainly not suggesting any kind of rent control because I don't believe in that, but I know people who've lived here a long time and a short time who really just can't afford to stay because of rents and the price of housing.
Yeah. Yeah, rising housing costs are a problem all over California. Yeah.
To Ken's point about the future of the workforce, the other unique part about millennials, generally speaking, is their job tenure is not nearly as long. They tend to work for an employer for less than 2 years, and then they move. And we are not, I don't think, positioned for that type of mobility, given our compensation structure, the reward for tenure, and that might be part of the problem attracting those millennials, is that we don't have the right package necessarily. I'm not sure. Or mobility.
But from a private industry part, Drew, I think the benefits we offer here far exceed anything from the private industry that I'm involved in. I know IT has great ones, but some of the legacy industries like we have, the aerospace, they don't offer anything. I mean,
I totally agree. I'm not sure, Mayor, that millennials appreciate that or even understand it to the degree that a Gen X would, for example. That's my only point.
Yeah.
Not an intelligence thing, it's just not a value thing. No offense over there.
Do we have millennials? We do. No.
Yeah, same.
B and D. I'm kind of caught up on B and D. First, B is it says that in 3 years, millennials will be 50% of the national workforce. And if I recall correctly, in our city, millennials only take up 26% of the workforce right now.
Yeah,
It's going to take maybe 10 years for that
Yeah.
to be true in this city. So we're
Exactly.
lagging.
yeah.
And it may be that El Segundo is situated where the housing prices are so high
Mm-hmm.
that it's tough to get millennials to stay here for a long time or work here,
Right.
right? And then D caught my eye because the sharing economy, as the mayor pointed out, there are a lot of things happening in the economy that the city is not in position to cash in on because it's changing. And one of the things is a lot of people are sharing workplaces. WeWorks, they talk to us before they move to Manhattan Beach, but what they do is they create a working environment where many different companies come in and share a space. That is a direct competition to some of the office spaces that we have in our city. And so the more and more people develop that, and it's really cost effective for them to do that, it's going to put pressure on our vacancy.
Wow.
And all of our tax structure is based on square footage and number of employees. So those are the types of things I think we need to keep an eye on and make sure that we're adjusting with the times.
And we have 3 of those. We have one coming in cross campus,
They
but
are.
we have Ignite, we have Biz House, so
Yeah.
we
There's
There's a
already.
new one on Mariposa and Center that's
So-
coming in.
That's right.
We've been supportive of that because those are great incubators, and small companies start that way, and then hopefully they stay in town and form a bigger company. But WeWorks is a different model. WeWorks it caters to much larger companies, and it's not so much of the incubators, and that I think is a pressure on some of our office space.
I'll just make a note of office space changes, because with that model changing, that may very well be a factor that you want to explore. How can you adapt to that? That's, you want to capture those businesses in town. Yeah.
I think it's very similar to what the state is doing. They're moving away from, maybe not moving away from, but evolving from gas tax to charging higher registration fee for electric cars. I think they're finding that they're not going to be able to get all of the revenue source that they got used to getting from the gas tax.
Yeah, Joe.
Kind of piggyback off of what Sam's talking about. So sales tax, the state is also looking right now at restructuring the sales and use tax. So right now it's just on goods, and there's heavy discussion in one of their committees, changing that to goods and services.
Oh, yeah.
I believe there's 4 other states that currently have that model that's on goods and services.
Yeah, as a possibility. Good. Other observations of what may be important for this city? Don?
Well, when you have a gap, I think it's important to focus on the revenue side of that gap and how it can be elevated, increased. In running the public school districts, we're forever receiving deficits from Sacramento. And if you can figure out a way to raise your revenue, you don't have to get into cutting your expenditures. And it's a divergent way and an unusual way to operate, but it does work. And it's a much more positive solution, of course. So I don't think the answer that you often see applied of reducing expenditures is the only answer to balancing that budget.
Yep. Good. Oh, yes, Carol.
Tag on to Don's point, that's a huge a shift in mindset. I know from just being also in the school districts, I'm constantly saying you have to act like a private business now. You have to step away from that model that you're just government and the money's coming from government. We always have to look for opportunities where we can bring in money to the city as well as the schools. And it's definitely a mind shift that needs to happen. You have to constantly be out there selling yourself as a city, and that's why the economic development's been so good, is because they take a much more of a selling approach. If you look at their materials, even their, the chairman that's here, everything is about selling El Segundo, and we as an organization need to be selling ourselves, sharing our successes, making it so that we are a worthy cause to invest in.
Good.
And That's why it's a huge mind shift, and I think we're going in that direction, which I'm pleased to see, but we constantly need to be looking at opportunities to sell our successes, showcase our successes, and then look for avenues for revenue as a result and capitalize upon those successes.
Right. Yeah, so focusing in on all those positives, and you have many of those. Good.
I have one thing to add too, just regarding the smaller talent pool. I think that's something that really emphasizes something currently already on our work plan and strategic plan, and that is succession planning. Not only is it difficult to recruit, but really what's happening is your highest performers are getting recruited out of the organization and taking promotions in other cities because other cities are facing the same issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, I think, that we focus a lot on our current employees and training and making sure that not everybody wants to progress, and obviously there's not enough positions for everybody to do that, but just retaining them in general.
You want El Segundo to be the best place for people to be, the place. Yeah, Drew.
Just,
Sorry.
I know we say it's a shrinking pool of people, but I think the city and all governments need to open their eyes a little bit and expand the people who they're going out and soliciting for jobs. I mean, just because you don't have city experience, people are trainable, and if you have skill sets and talents, they can really step in. And in the private sector, you see people, to Drew's point, they go from job to job to job, and they have a wealth of knowledge and are able to mold and blend in. And I think from this, what I've seen at the city, we tend to only look for like-minded people or like-minded skill sets. And I think to get away from just this smaller pool, we really need to expand and not just look for people that have city experience and go for talent rather than just experience.
Yeah, no, that's actually happening all over, and I suspect that Greg could speak to that. That certainly is happening. We're, for finance people, looking for people who have a whole variety of finance experience or HR or whatever it might be.
Broaden your
You really
horizons,
do.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Drew?
There's just one trend that we didn't talk that much about. The mayor and I met with, and Greg and I, with DWP recently, and they're kind of in somewhat of a conundrum. They don't know what to do with their plant because they're getting so much political pressure to move to 90%, 100% renewables.
Oh.
They're actually and this isn't confidential information, is it, Greg? I don't think it is. No, it's actually all over the news. But anyway,
It will be.
they just spent a ton of capital to rebuild some of their power plants or their generating stations, and now they're getting pressure to convert to maybe battery technology. So that's right in our backyard. I don't know what Chevron's going to be doing in 10, 20 years in R&D. British Petroleum's been doing a lot of that stuff for years, or at least marketing that. I just suggest that there's going to be so much innovation in industry that's outside of our control that we need to be abreast of. Like, aerospace is changing. We have a ton of hangar bay dedicated to aerospace in this town. We have a lot of space dedicated to energy production in this town. And so I think we need to be working with industry to understand that and what the implications are going to be for our city.
Constantly be aware of what they're doing and capitalize on that. Good.
Well, Jen, I think they're all important issues, but the one that really keeps me awake at night is the CalPERS issue. We've worked really hard through the tax resolution agreement and Measure B to increase our revenues by about $10 million. Our CalPERS number is going up by $10 million over the next 5 years. So all of that effort's essentially spent on where we are today, and we're going to have to go through that process again somehow to cover that expense. And I don't think they're done adjusting the formulas yet.
Yeah, no, they're not.
What their percentage of rate of return is.
Finding ways to increase revenue like we did to meet a challenge like that. We're going to have to keep operating that way and find new sources.
Right. Mayor?
I was saying CalPERS doesn't even know what the rate of return is. They
Right.
keep adjusting it, so then the greater burden is on the cities to provide that. In fact, I have asked for a graph going back a few years, similar to what you have, that shows our calculated pension liability and our suggested revenue over the same period of time, and the delta in between. And in addition to CalPERS, we have so many other obligations for a city.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
The trends that we see, you know, I'm looking at, you know, we're looking at an increase in cost for CalPERS for our costs there. And when we talked about the shared services and everything else, we're actually looking at a decrease in our revenue streams, right? So that gap is today big, but the future, if not changed, I think is a divergent path, which gets worse and worse. And that's what concerns me, is I don't know how you focus on that divergence as opposed to just the revenue side of it, because I don't think you can, you know, there's two things that have to happen on that to bring it back together, and that's concerning, and that's not an easy answer. That's a very tough one.
And that's why I've asked for a graph showing maybe 15 or 20 years so that it's visual to see what that is, Mike.
Yeah. Just major changes in the business model.
It's
all
not just
over.
El Segundo, it's everywhere.
No,
So
it's
that's-
everywhere.
So that's a global
Absolutely.
issue that's going to change. So things are going to change here, and they're going to change around
Yeah.
us.
It's a national issue. It's certainly a California issue. It's cities all over, and we work with cities all over the state. It's very significant. There's no question about that. Yeah, and this issue of shopping centers closing, big box stores closing, because Amazon is also going to conquer the world. It's a major issue. So.
Jen, just to add to our other comment. So the city does need to look at, you know, new revenue sources. We're enhancing existing revenue sources. And a lot of our neighboring cities, you know, I've talked to my colleagues about this, they've maxed out a lot of their revenue options. El Segundo, we're very fortunate. I think we still have many options that we can look at to address these issues moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good position to be in then.
Yes.
That's good.
But the flip side of that is we're very careful about the options because we are the most business-friendly city in the county, and in order to keep attracting and retaining businesses here, we don't want to price them out.
Absolutely.
So I'll add to a focus on business friendly, because that certainly has been a theme. Good. Okay. So I'm going to turn this over to Joe for, we've got a couple of slides here, and then we'll go through these, I think 3 slides, and then we will take a break, because I know people have been sitting here for quite some time. So, Joe, do you want to get up here, or do you want to go from there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a 5-year forecast of where the city's heading. So the 17-18 budget process kicked off in early May. We're still in the preliminary stages of developing the budget, but all departments have turned in their department budgets to finance. Myself and my team, we've met with all the departments, reviewed the budgets, fine-tuned them. The next step in the process is to meet with Greg. So myself and the department heads are going to be meeting with Greg starting end of this week and through next week to review those budgets and come up with a preliminary budget. Currently, it stands at about $69 million. That's both revenues and expenditures. So you'll see that's where we're at right now for 17-18. And the divergence, what you see in the out years, so the blue line represents the revenues, and there's a healthy trend that revenues are increasing. And that's, you know, very conservative assumptions that were used there. The problem is the expenditures, the red line, is increasing greater than the revenues, and what's driving that is the CalPERS costs. There are some other contractual service costs that are going up 1-2%, whatever the CPI may be, but the main driver here is the CalPERS pension costs. So looking out to 22-23, there's a gap right now. If you didn't do anything to the revenues, you just left the revenue sources as is, there's a gap of $5.6 million out to 22-23. Cumulative gap is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15 million all the years. And that's obviously something the city, we need to address, and it's a policy discussion at the council level. So on the plus side, we do have very strong reserves. Currently, the general fund reserve is at 18%. We're about $12.2 million. The long-term policy goal of the council is to maintain a 20% reserve. The Economic Uncertainty Fund is currently funded at $2 million, so that it is in full compliance with the council's policy goal. So between the two, the General Fund and Economic Uncertainty Fund, we have about $14.2 million for this year in reserves. The TOT increase with the passage of Measure B last year, the TOT rate went up from 8% to 12%, increasing general fund revenues by over $2 million annually. That's ongoing revenue stream, which is great for the city. Dedicated funding for street and sidewalk improvements. So in November 2016, LA County residents passed Measure M. Measure M is LA County's special half-cent sales tax that will generate approximately $250,000 a year for the city of El Segundo, and that's ongoing revenue. Senate Bill 1, SB 1, also referred to as the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017. This was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor recently. This will generate $482,000 for fiscal year 17-18 for the city. It's about $131,000 over the current gas tax amount. But this has gradual increases because there are certain triggers in SB 1 that are implemented over the next 3 years. So for 18-19, that goes up to $678,000 a year. And then 19-20, it's projected to be about $700,000 a year, and that's ongoing. So between SB 1 and Measure M, we're looking at about $1 million per year ongoing in new revenue fund sources for the city.
So the good news is that like Richmond Street used general fund dollars, we have a dedicated source of funding going forward for street and sidewalk improvements.
Correct. Highlight some of the other plus sides. Constant policy and staff focus on economic development. We see that going on all the time, especially today was a good example. Cost allocation and fee studies underway. And department heads conscious of operating within their budget. So that's been mentioned several times. Very conscientious. Looks like we're headed about $1 to $1.5 million under budget this year. We'll see as we get closer to the fiscal year end. Some of the challenges that we face is the CalPERS cost trending up, and we just saw the graph on the out years where that's projected to go. Infrastructure costs higher than current resources were expected future resources. So Measure M and SB 1 will help close some of that gap, or a majority of it. Maintenance costs are rising. Recession likely within the next few years, so that will have obviously a negative impact on revenues. Impacts of pending labor negotiations, so that has not been factored into the forecast yet as well. Challenges with traditional revenue sources, so we've talked about the changing economy and what that means. So some of the biggest challenges that the city is going to face is sales tax and the UUT. So our UUT has been declining over the last several years, and we're projecting that is going to continue to decline going forward as well.
People are more efficient, right, in their use of electricity and water.
And a lot of the building codes, solar panels, so it's having a negative impact on the UUT. Then implementation of new technology and funding that technology is going to be a challenge we face moving forward as well.
On your second bullet on the plus side, you said the TOT increases were $2 million. Weren't we talking about when we were campaigning for that 3.2 million?
That's the way I remember.
Yes.
What's your 2 million?
I'm sorry. It's 3.2 million, not 2 million. Correct. That is correct. Thank you for that correction.
You just made $1 million too. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, a typo. Future financial decisions over the next 2 years. So these are all going to be key. Whether to seek new revenue sources, and that's going to be a policy discussion at the council level. how to tackle the CalPERS unfunded liability. So we have kicked off the ad hoc committee for the CalPERS liability, and we've met twice already. We're meeting again next week. Prioritizing and funding implementation of new technology. I believe the technology committee is going to be recommending the top 10 projects to move forward with soon. Cost recovery policy discussion and implementation of the fee study. Top golf. Review of current business model for trash, water, and sewer. So water and sewer, the Prop 218 process, that's going to be coming up late next year. And a policy discussion on how to address the business model for trash. Land use discussions, infrastructure financing, stormwater costs, and then future salary and compensation models, which is going to be key as well.
Are there any comments or questions on the financial outlook at this point? Next meeting, we will drill down a little bit more, but just as a high-level overview, I'm going to give you an opportunity.
Well, the one thing that's different about government in a lot of ways is there are some internal things that we can control, and there are some external things that we can't control that affect our revenues particularly, and our expenses in the
Absolutely.
case of CalPERS.
Yeah. Chief?
General observation, and this comes from experience of working at now 3 different agencies. This is my third and final one. And it speaks to the mission that we've identified here of a great place to live, work, and visit. And I think we have that. I think it occurs every day. And I'm not discarding any of the issues, but it's a general approach in terms of the way we function in the city. If somebody has an issue or problem, they step into the fire station, the police station, the library, city hall, and they say, I'm having a problem with X. We stop what we do and we fix that problem right away. I don't know anywhere else that does that.
Yeah.
I don't. And the question is, do we want to lose that? And I think we should be working very hard to make sure that we work exceedingly hard to not lose this idea of a great place to work, live, and visit. And you know, we can certainly do a better job on our KPIs and our, you know, and the analytics, but this is a unique place. It's a unique city, and I think it's great. We need to work hard to maintain that.
Yeah. So be mindful of it. What does it take to actually be that kind of a community? Is what you're talking about. Good. That's a good point. Good. Okay, you've been sitting very patiently for a long time, so let's take a 10-minute break. We'll start again at 5 till 2. Okay.
So Jan gave us high marks for our accomplishments so far, right?
Yeah, so far. I know. I think you're doing very well. We're staying right on target, actually. We're doing very well. Yeah, when I do the agenda, I do a detailed facilitators agenda that has all the times. Of course, I don't give that to anybody else because invariably there'd be somebody in the room saying, it's 2:45 and you're supposed to be. But for myself, though, I do, and we are right on time. So you'll be happy to hear that. We're right on time. So I wanted just to tell you what we're going to do the rest of today. We're going to spend a few minutes on either affirming the 5 goals or modifying those. And this is more for at the council level, but certainly asking for input from department heads as well. But you just set your goals last year, those 5 broad goals, and in an ideal world, the 5 broad goals would not change dramatically from year to year, but it is an opportunity to at least do a check-in on those. And then we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon discussing the priorities worksheet. And so I'll walk through that first with you, and then we're going to go through those item by item. So, affirming or modifying the key goals. You identified 5 goals. These are the goals. And so the question is, are there any major categories that are missing now that you've been working with these goals for the last year? And I'm not talking about tasks or projects, because that's where we get down to the priorities, but categories. You've got your customer service and engagement, support community safety and preparedness, develop as a choice employer and workforce, develop your quality infrastructure and technology, and champion economic development and fiscal sustainability. So you've got 5 broad areas there. Yes, Drew.
Maybe I'm missing it, that we had
You missing one?
kind of shoehorned something about the environment in there. Is that not the case, Greg?
You guys talked about it.
I don't-
Last year. But I think you decided to start with these 5.
Okay. Maybe it fit under infrastructure? I don't know. But it just occurs to me, especially after hearing Jan talk about all these trends that are coming forward and the fact that a lot of the players in our community are going to be changing the way in which they do business based on environmental regulations or trends, that it's something that we should be more acutely focused on.
You definitely introduced it last year, Drew, and I think the council's position at that time was, let's focus on these 5 for now, and maybe it's something that can be added in the future.
Yeah.
And Jan, putting you on the spot for
Yeah.
a minute,
Well,
what does other cities have that we don't have? Is there anything that's sort of obviously missing, or?
yeah. Well, I would say that certainly is a growing area that certainly could fit into your developed quality infrastructure. You know, that whole notion of the environment. If that's where your land use comes in. The one that struck me is kind of where does your land use planning and the environment together, go? And but that doesn't mean you can't fit those in a broader definition in a couple of these, such as your even economic development and fiscal sustainability. You could certainly define that goal to include some aspects of environment, dealing with your economic development, dealing with land use. But those are 2 areas
We do
that
have land
many
use
cities are dealing with.
objectives
You
in
do
our-
have
in
the
our work
objectives,
program.
absolutely you
And
do.
I think did we squeeze those in under fiscal sustainability and
I think
economic
you did,
development? I think,
yeah.
right?
And that's,
So they touch on other things.
Yeah, it's
You know,
fine.
having good regulations relates back to service and customer service and probably infrastructure as well, right?
Planning, building safety, lead buildings, I think it's a component of everything. That's
Maybe you could help me with the history of why the environmental committee was formed and when? Anyone?
The environmental committee?
Yes.
It was formed with this current council.
No.
No.
Oh, no, that's right, but it sort of dissolved for a while and then came back with even a new purpose.
When I started in 2008, the environmental committee existed. There was an environmental position, analyst position in Public Works that was dedicated to just that task.
Was that driven by regulation? Like, what prompted that position? I'm trying to understand why it was important then, but less so now, potentially.
There was a trend in local government, and Jan, you can help me with this, probably in the early 2000s, and when cities were doing better financially, to start broadening their scope and look at other things outside traditional core services. And it was pretty common for cities to start taking on environmental initiatives. We also started having more mandates about
yes.
developing climate action plans and that type of thing. And there wasn't a traditional department really in cities that dealt with this, so cities started recruiting and hiring environmental analysts or people to deal with those programs. And we had one for several years. And during the recession, that position was eliminated. The environmental committee stopped meeting as frequently, and I think this council has put more priority on it, and they've begun meeting, and we have more people in the community that are interested in it and being on the committee.
Did they bring forth a list of recommendations or anything for this strategic planning session?
I think they developed their own work plan and made recommendations around what cities could do in their day-to-day practices to be more environmentally sensitive. They had
I get another way to achieve it, Greg, I don't mean to cut you off, but if there are some tasks similar to the ones you mentioned about land use that fall under that, then maybe that's enough. Are there any tasks in the work plan that are specific to being a better steward of the environment?
none that come to mind. No.
It was with building and lead buildings and.
For the energy code, I guess, their
Yeah,
mandates. Right?
you know, I was at a different city when
as Greg mentioned, many of the cities started to take environmental measures more seriously. And I recall, I was at a much lower position, but I recall there was a larger meeting involving mayors throughout the country. They all signed into an agreement or a document, and they came back from that conference, I seem to recall. And many of the cities took a more serious role in environmental. They created environmental committees. I joined the city of El Segundo in 2008, 2009, and the environmental committee, like a lot of other cities, were pushing for LEED-like requirements in city regulations. And I was aware at the time that Arnold Schwarzenegger was very close to signing green building standards for the state code. So I told them that, and I encouraged them to maybe hold off on having separate, possibly conflicting regulations at the local level, and that's what the city did. But just prior to that, many cities adopted LEED-like standards. So I think that's kind of the history.
Drew, there was also another major driver, which was the federal regulation, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination, NPDS. And through that regulation, they push it down to local government to be responsible for tracking and monitoring water quality going out through the sewer lines and through the curbs and gutters. And most of the cities in the Los Angeles basin, that was a mandate, and an unfunded mandate, and it was an easy fix. It either went to the fire department or to Public Works, and the fire department most often kicked it to Public Works. So that's a main driver of where a lot of the cities got into the environmental discussion.
There are definitely two ways to look at the environmental issues, and that's the compliance and the mandates, from stormwater pollution, as the chief mentioned, to air quality, anything else. And within that stormwater pollution, by the way, there's subsets of unfunded mandates of total maximum daily loads of pollutants to go into receiving waters. So they're loaded within the overarching law. So typically, engineering, Public Works has taken on kind of the mandates because we own and maintain the systems that these, let's say, stormwater flows go through. Then, as far as an environmental committee and going above and beyond and taking on additional programs and thinking what we could do as a city as a whole, that seems to be the role of the committee. And it has been in place for a while, and they have been meeting, and they do have a draft work plan that's made available. They do have a purchasing policy that we've gone through and is in routing, but it does definitely take staff resources to partner with the environmental committee to go above and beyond these mandates, which are onerous.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting more of a mindset, because I'm not suggesting adding a bunch of regulations, compliance. As I've said before publicly, I've experienced when AB 32 affected my own business and almost put it out of business. But I'm thinking, we have a parking problem in El Segundo, right? There are many ways to skin the cat, and one could be getting environmentally community-minded people to come up with creative solutions to encourage ride-sharing, electric bikes, bike pass, other means to affect that change for the employee base anyway. And right now, we're not really having those. I don't experience us having those conversations. But what about the environmental component when we're at the table having discussions? I've heard it come up when you talk to Raytheon that wants to repurpose their land. Let's get some green space. But to me, unless I'm missing something, that seems to be the depth of it. And Greg, you might disagree. It looks like you might disagree, but I'm just suggesting that we should spend more time talking about it versus less.
Maybe a thought, and this is it's a guess on my part, but prior to California adopting the Green Code standards, what dominated this discussion was LEED,
Right.
and I don't think I'm stretching it when I say that LEED actually wasn't a very fond of green codes, because it actually competed with LEED, and LEED is expensive. To get the certification, go through that process, it costs developers quite a bit of money. Right. So when green codes came out, and actually was a mandate, people quickly figured out that if you do a lot of the things that's in green code, you're kind of doing all the things that LEED lead identifies with. So I think, if I were to guess, I think the strength of Green Code and how Green Codes came about is it came out in 2010, and every 3 years, what used to be pretty much all voluntary has little by little has become more and more mandatory. So as Green Code's gotten stronger and more mandatory measures have kicked in, I think people speak less of lead standards and the costs associated with lead certifications and whatnot.
So what I think hearing you say, Drew, is more of a question about should an awareness of environmental concerns be somewhere on the radar screen for the
Right.
city, as
I think if you-
opposed to mandating a list of programs.
Right. My gut is if you asked our voting constituents to what degree they care about the environment, it would be greater than the middle point, as long as it doesn't get in the way of business and the way in which they conduct their lives. So I'm not suggesting that it's cumbersome, onerous. I'm suggesting we should think about it and talk about it and have those conversations.
So let me just get a sense of, from the other council members, whether some awareness of environment would be of interest that could be potentially added into one of the others. I don't know that you need a separate goal. Maybe you do. But Mayor, you had your hand.
I was just going to say, before I was on council, I thought Northrop Grumman gifted a kiosk to planning and building safety for environmental building, the green that you were talking about. So, I mean, that's one way for awareness when people are going to build or remodel their homes, their resources.
It's still there. It's jointly with Public Works, but it's at the front counter at the customer service area.
I think what Drew's saying is, it's like, as we go through all of our decision-making processes, we should be having a reflection of, are we being as environmentally savvy as we can be, or green? So it's not just one area, it's a change in how you think, and it should be part of the conversation at all times.
The factor. What's the cost? What's the effect on our people? What's the effect on our residents? What's the effect on our businesses? How long is it sustainable? And what's the impact on the environment? It's just another decision factor. But right now, we're not having that discussion.
I agree. I mean, I see things like when I walk through City Hall, other places I've worked, they have water coolers built in the wall for refilling your cup instead of ordering cases and cases of water bottles. And I mean, there are things we can do that are simple.
Okay.
It's just
And I think
everything.
we're fortunate. We have these great water. When water was the main topic, we have these great water reclamation numbers, but that is buoyed by the business community. And if we really measured what was happening residentially, anecdotally, if you looked at my block and other blocks, you would find a different outcome. So we're not measuring really what kind of environmental steward we're being. I don't know how you measure that, but there should be something there, I would think, that we could just look to say we're being good stewards, or there's room for opportunity.
You know, one thing we had, and again, this was prior to the Green Code, I think probably 2007, maybe even earlier. The city adopted a policy where when city buildings were built, that they would lead by example, and that it would be a certain level of lead certification. And I believe when Fire Station 2 was built, it had lead certification because it followed that policy.
Okay. So what I'm hearing as a suggestion, and let me just check the sense of the council, as a suggestion, not necessarily this would become a new goal, but rather it would be a factor, and as part of the strategic plan, there could be an articulation of the factors that the city takes into account as you make decisions. And environmental would be one, financial, impact on businesses, impact on residents, long-term sustainability of the decision. There may be a variety of feasibility, for instance. So if that, let me just check to see if, as an approach, and then we can, after today's workshop, we can put something together and bring that back next week at the next meeting to see if that makes sense as a way that you can build that into future considerations. So just as a way to move forward today. Carol, does that sound okay? Don?
I like the 5 we have.
So, yeah, keep the goal, but somehow articulate the decision factors and put this as one of them. Potentially. We could come back and show you what that would look like, but keep the goals. Yeah. And Mike, do you have any?
When I think of environmental, right, I go back to my working days, and it's like agencies like the AQMD and everybody else in enforcement, right? So anything I think about that's going to get into a code enforcement kind of a thing just turns me off.
Yeah.
That's not the discussion I'm hearing people talk about here. So I don't know how, if it needs another name to ring in my ears here that doesn't turn me off on environmental, but something about recycling and all the, the concepts about ride sharing. And so I don't know if there's another trigger that could make that more compatible to my ears, but I'm sure I'm not alone out there. But when you hear about environmental, that's a,
Sure.
but
okay.
I, I want to be supportive to those, all of those issues. I just don't want to get into an enforcement around,
No, I'm hearing
NPDES and other
awareness,
issues.
not of enforcement.
Awareness.
Well, one thing that some cities do is, that, like in a staff report to purchase something, there's an assessment sentence or paragraph about, is this the most environmentally sound
true,
approach?
true.
Yes or no, and if it's no, then why, right? Because it's twice as much, or, right? Just some analysis or assessment of,
It's just more of an awareness. Okay. Okay. So,
So
yes,
can I-
Carol.
So back to your point about
Yeah.
affirming or modify the key goals. So as I'm looking at these goals, I'm big on artist suggestion. And when I look at these goals, this as I read them, it tells me we're not there. And I'm a firm believer, if you say you're the best, then you will be the best. So as I read these goals, and maybe this is not the year to do it, and maybe it's next year, but I would almost recommend that we change the goals so it's more of, instead of enhanced customer service engagement, it says we're a five-star organization. And it's like we are the customer service. Or when we talk about safety's number one. Or when we talk about develop as a choice employer and workplace, we say we have energetic, innovative, talented. We're an energetic, engaged, talented workforce, or whatever word you want to use. But it's almost like you're stating what you want to be, rather than saying, "Oh, we're going to be a developer of choice." And that's why I said we may not be there yet, but maybe we're a year from that. But I really want to get to a point where you state what you want to be, because it's artist suggestion.
The only thing that doesn't resonate with me is a goal has to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timed. And when you say something like we are 5-star, that's not any of those things.
Engaged and enhanced.
Enhanced, but you can start building on that, what that means, and
Well,
either
it's the same. It's just a difference of interpretation, because that doesn't enhance customer service. Like, what does that mean?
I think it means identifying opportunities.
Well, I think we're coming up with goals with that, like subset goals, and also KPIs and surveys, and we'll see what that means.
Yeah. Well,
We have our interpretation, and our customers have their interpretation.
I get it, but by saying we're a 5-star city, so we can have goals that say, here's what's going to make us that way. And then maybe we're a year away from it.
Yeah,
Maybe we're not there yet, but that's where I would like to get
Yeah,
to.
I think you may be a year away from it, but the notion of stating what these really are, what you expect to be 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, that can be helpful for everybody to know what you're striving for. So, I've made a note of that, and that may be something that could be revisited in the definitions. Yeah.
I may be.
Okay. But I'm not hearing any new categories, per se, so. Okay, so for now, and we're going to be back here on August 8th, so for now, though, we'll live with these categories, and then we will finalize that on the 8th. Everybody good? Okay. Okay. And Carol, I think this next slide gets to kind of what you were saying. Yeah. And I think this is an important question, and I think that needs to be developed. What are really the outcomes that are being looked for?
I may be a bit premature.
Yeah. So I'd like to now give an orientation to the Priorities Worksheet, and everybody should have this. And again, it's the same document, and the public should have in the same document here. And you'll find it on page, let's see, well, it starts at the bottom it says page 3, but it looks like this. Okay, this one here, okay. It says, it very handily says Priorities Worksheet, so. Okay. So I'd like to have you go to the next page, which starts a chart. And that would be something that looks like this for the public, okay? Carol?
Lucia's just informed me that we have some ice cream sandwiches there to
Oh.
cool everybody down, but they'll melt if we don't eat
Okay,
them. So
let's-
if anyone's interested in getting them.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just take 5 minutes to go get your ice cream sandwiches and come right back. Let's do that. Yeah.
I don't want them to melt.
Okay, I'm going to charge right ahead here, even as people are getting their last minute.
They're listening, Jan.
Okay, very good. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through the process that I have planned for this and just make sure that we're all on the same page with that before we start looking at the specific suggested priorities, and I'll explain how that worksheet is working. So with this, and I apologize, we've got a lot of stuff up here, but hopefully you can see the PowerPoint. So with this worksheet, so I've listed the priorities that when I conducted my interviews with each one of the city council members, I asked you what are the priorities that you hope the city will accomplish over the coming year. The city is needing to put its budget together, and so it's really important to be able to understand what those priorities are. I also then asked the city manager, what are the key things that are high priorities that are on the city's staff's plate or need to be on the city's staff plate? And so those are also on this sheet. And as we go through it, I will be able to distinguish which they are. The priorities have been placed into one of the 5 goal areas so that we're staying with that framework. And so that we can try to see whether or not you're actually focusing in on all 5 of those goals in the way that you want to. So that's the overall framework. Now, today is going to be about understanding and hearing from staff and having council members ask questions and explain why they think things are high priorities that you suggested should be on the list. And so today is really about learning and understanding and asking questions and having a conversation. Next session, which is on August 8th, the intent is for us to be placing these items into a couple of tiers, a tier 1 and a tier 2. And the reason for that is that you have a lot. This is a very long list of priorities. And the thing about priorities is that if you have too many, and if the council has actually not been able to say, we really want these 5 or 7 things moving forward, these are the most important things, then other things can really drop off the list. And it's critical that the council be able to provide that direction. And so if you end up with a list as long as what's on here and say these are all number 1 priorities, then what happens is that the staff absolutely has to prioritize. And it's better when the council can say, these are our priorities. And that's really what this session and the next session is about. So today is about learning, understanding, hearing the council. Next time will be about the council saying which ones are tier 1. And the tier 1, as this says up here, are going to be the council's top priorities, and they're going to receive the primary attention. I've already heard a few things that I bet will end up on the tier 1. Tier 2 are also going to be priorities that move forward, but they're never going to get in the way of your tier 1. They're going to move forward, but as resources permit. And the city manager will be directed to allocate resources in the budget to the extent the budget has a capacity for those things. And that'll come as the budget's prepared. And then there may be some things on this chart that need to go into a third category, which is basically things to consider in the future. It doesn't mean they should drop off, doesn't mean that they're not important, but under the vein of you can't do everything at once, consider them opportunities for the future. So that's the framework that I've created for this conversation, and as a way for you to determine really what's most important to you as a city council and give that direction to the staff at the next meeting. So let me first ask the council whether you're comfortable with that framework, so that we're starting out on the same page. Does that sound okay? Okay. So this little explanation is kind of what I just said. Today we're going to go through the priorities worksheet. Next meeting, we're going to do some dot voting. How many of the council members have done dot voting before? And it's only the council that does the dot voting, and to do the tier 1 and tier 2, so just you. Then we will look to see what the results are, what emerges as the top tier 1 and tier 2, and discuss the results and see if the council thinks that those results really are the final results. And then step 4 is important, because then the city manager and department heads need to take a look at those and say, yeah, we've got enough staff resources that these 7 things in tier 1, absolutely, we can move forward, make progress, and we can assure you that we're really going to get those things done.
Not everything can be a tier 1.
But not everything is a tier 1. No, it can't be. But anyway, so that's the validation point. So if that's okay, yes, Drew?
Will we have any dollars associated with any of these decisions?
We won't today, and Greg, I'm going to have you help me with this a little bit, but my understanding is that after the tier 1 and tier 2, then the staff will go off and do the budget and determine what you really have the capacity for. But I think next week you and the department heads will be able to say generally you think you can do the things on tier 1 and tier 2. Or can you respond to that?
Well, Joe, when are we going to know what funding we have available outside of sort of core operations?
So when we meet with you later this week and next week, we should have a fairly solid idea of what that number's looking like.
So when we have the prioritization exercise in August,
In August.
we'll know what our available funding is for everything, I guess. And we can start working on putting prices to some of these so that we understand what we're talking about.
Okay, so it sounds like the answer is pretty much yes. Probably not definitively yes, but they'll be pretty close, so that when the council says these are the top 5 or 7, the staff should be able to say yes, and we have capacity to move forward on these. Is that an accurate statement? And then tier 2, same thing. Is that okay?
The preliminary numbers that we're talking about as far as available funds for next year are going to be largely dependent on how we close this current year and what we're able to carry over. Because you saw that our revenues and our expenses sort of match each other for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about how efficient or what money are we not spending this year that we're able to carry over for one-time expenses for next year. We also have some outstanding offers to labor groups that have some expenses associated with them that we hope to resolve. And we need to build those costs in as well.
Okay. And I think the other important consideration, and as we start walking through this, I think that very question perhaps would be relevant. In some cases, it's a staff capacity question. It's actually not new dollars, but it's rather, do we do this thing or this thing? Which is the most important? And that's going to be really critical at the next session for the council to say, for next year, this is more important than this. So,
Are we going to be limited to the number of tier 1 versus tier 2 votes we get?
well, I will give you a finite number of dots, and then we'll look at I'll probably give you 6 for each one, and then we'll look to see what happens from that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And so we're just going to work from this, and I just have it up here for convenience. These charts are exactly what's here. So we're just going to start with number 1, refine the strategic plan and create a short version to use as a communication vehicle. Oh, I apologize. The things in bold came to me in my interviews with council members, and the things in italics came from the staff as priorities that are important to them. Yes?
So the priorities on this first page, this worksheet,
Oh,
are we going over those individually?
no, I hadn't intended to.
Oh, okay.
Those are just challenges facing the city of El
Okay, so those
Segundo.
are just
That's
comments.
just background.
Okay, okay.
It's just background.
I was going to say, because one of them I don't feel, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's just background, that's just, yeah,
I have one other clarifying question.
okay.
Is there going to be an opportunity to say what's missing, perhaps?
Yes, actually, what I thought is at the end of each of the goal areas, I'll ask if there's something missing from the council. Yeah, yeah. But I'm gonna, yeah. Or we can do it at the very end. But yes, there's always that opportunity for council to add things. Of course. Okay, so the first one, this is going to be a little bit of a tag team with the city manager and department heads and myself. So I guess what I'd like to do is just ask for any, minor comments on any of these that require a minor comment. We don't want a major comment on everything because then we'll never get through it today. So let me turn it to you.
So the first one, is that what you're asking me? Is,
Yeah,
I
just
think
the
is,
first one.
is making the community aware of the strategic plan in a shorter version, a more usable version, was a comment that one of the council members suggested. That's relatively easy to do at the end of this process, right?
Yeah, yes. Okay. So we're just going to go through, but if any council member says, I don't understand that, or you want to talk about it, please, let me know, okay?
I wonder if anybody out there cares about that, seeing a shortened form. I don't think they care.
I think if it's positioned the right way, Dr. Brand, they would care. And if you asked for their, what do you think about this? This is where we're headed. If you put that on ESPN, I guarantee you'd have a ton of comments, as an example. So I think if it's teed up the right way, people will care. It's probably something that
I don't think it's difficult to accomplish.
No. At the very least, we should have a working document that people can get their head around, I would think, in terms of the direction of the city. If you're left to leave that other document, forget it.
It's too hard.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also we need to make sure it's very easy to, as you go through the strategic plan, ascertain which goal you're discussing, so it's real clear, it's almost like a drill down. Here's our 5 goals, and then underneath each of those goals, you could see what the city's working on, but so that you, as a consumer of the information, I can select at which level I want to see the information, and I should be able to go at a high level and then drill down if I need to, and I should be able to determine, as I read each of the goals and objectives, that, this is aligned with that strategic goal. So there's a roadmap.
Yeah.
Just another anecdote. The technology committee, Lindsay Breeden, volunteered his time to build the city's newsletter and train Mickey Tagle on how to get that out.
Oh,
And they're already up to,
5.
how many people?
There's a lot.
A couple thousand?
A couple thousand.
subscribers?
3,000 people opting in to get a newsletter from
Wow.
the city about what's going on. So I think
People who are engaged.
That's impressive.
people do care, but they want the information on their terms when they want it.
It's got to be easy to read.
Okay.
Friendly.
And it has to be official.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, a Facebook page, that's not ours. It all has to go out on city.
Yeah. Okay, yes, Mike.
When it's all over and done with, when you have, and I'm a big proponent of having it in some kind of a condensed version that has some priority mixed into it also, right? Because the value of that is, hypothetically, if you had everything prioritized and you said, okay, there's 3 or 4 things that are really important, so that anything I'm doing in the city, if it offends one of those 4 things, I'll know it and everybody will know it, and then I'll say, oh, wait, I shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a,
Like a guiding principle.
well, yeah, so, yeah.
And that's part of having clear council priorities too, is that you can communicate what those are.
And the cost too, because we need to communicate to the public how much things are going to cost.
Right.
We'd all like,
Right, okay, so the second one is community
We're
survey.
committed to, we're meeting with a potential consultant this afternoon.
Right after this meeting.
This afternoon?
To take a look at
I hope not before 4:30.
So this is absolutely something that we want to do, and it's really more about executing now.
Okay. Any questions from council on the community survey?
It's a language issue. I just
Oh.
conduct a community service sounds like it's a one-time periodic thing as opposed to an ongoing assessment of what our residents and businesses think about us based on transaction points in the city. Just a little bit of a,
Okay, so that would be two different things. I mean, one would be a
what
survey.
we talked about a year ago
and
was
then-
a full-blown customer service
Mhm.
methodology to really understand what our constituents expect and what they think about us as a city. And going out to doing a survey, I don't think helps us achieve that goal.
Because you got to, once you do the survey, you have to say, and here's what we heard from you, and these are things we're doing. So can't just do a survey, because then people are thinking, well, I told them what they wanted to hear, but I didn't hear, nothing's being done. So you have to be careful, you have to manage that process.
But the important thing is, it's not a scientific survey, so it can be like front-loaded
Yeah.
with people doing something, and then they say, well, you got all this feedback that you want this, but we have to serve an entire community, not
Right.
just one group of
I
vocal
think we want to do
people.
both, Mayor. I think we want to capture people at the places that they interact with the city. Fire, police, planning, finance. What was your experience like? In addition to
Completely agree.
more of a, kind of a bellwether, what do you think about the city?
Well, yeah, we want to know what people want more of and what they like and what they don't like or want improved, and then we want to focus on that improvement. right?
Okay, so I've captured an ongoing assessment of how we're doing at the point of contact and a community survey, which some communities do a community survey every other year, or every year, or, every some interval, so, okay.
I just want to be sure that everybody is reached out to. Like, I'll use an example of senior citizens might not be on Facebook or online, and their opinions are important too, that
Yeah.
we take them into consideration, so we don't just rely on one method or one group of people.
So I think 3 is hand in hand with 2. That's the customer service.
Oh, right, okay. So maybe, 2 and 3 together, and maybe those, could be reframed a little bit. Okay.
Number 4 is about identifying successes that the
Yeah.
city has and publicizing those with the community. And there are some examples that were listed about using the newsletter to do that, the city's Facebook page. A council member shared this thought with you, though, and I'd be curious to see if there are...
Right, yes. There was an interest on the part of one or more council members about just highlighting successes, both for economic development purposes, but also for just the general public. Would any council member want to comment on that, who may have said that? Oh, Don, I thought you were raising your hand. but-
No, I was getting rid of it, and that
Oh.
was bothering me.
Sorry.
Well, I think it's important to share successes. Depending on who you listen to, you could think maybe nothing good ever happens in town. And we know that 95% of the things that happen in town are really good. So,
Yeah. Yes,
So
Carol?
I'm a big believer in sharing successes. I mean, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, but it's not just, it's sharing successes to our community, which this is, but it's also sharing small successes within each department and team. So, I mean, I'm a firm believer that, if a team knows that their simple successes or small successes, how big or small they are shared with their bosses or their bosses' bosses, then people strive to always have a success. And it just breeds positivity. And so it's not just to the community, but it's even within the organization, there should be, hey, great job. Did you know that the fire department was able to implement this or do this, or the planning department? Simple things, and just come up, even if it's an avenue or a medium that does just from internal communication, that's still a positive thing. And so it's not just communicating to the public. And then what you can do is, once you start at that level of sharing information internally, then you can take some of those, and it's easy to pick from that information pool and put it on your newsletter.
I agree completely, Carol. We had a meeting a couple months ago where somebody came to thank Meredith's people for the pool, the master swimming, I think, or something. And I mean, it's so easy to take a picture, and that should, I mean, we should have pages on our website for that.
Exactly.
There's so many good things happen with our employees, and
Those are all good thoughts. We're going to talk about it more under Goal C.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, good.
And it's also saying thank or sharing the success of a change that they made as a result of looking at their KPIs, or hey, we've just done this in our department and it's bringing us closer to our goal of being best in customer service, and keep tying it back to our goal, so we're constantly being reminded of what they are.
Very good. Good ideas. Okay, so,
The next one is Mayor Pro Tem Boyles has brought up a couple of times, and we've told him that we would talk about it during strategic planning, which is looking at options for how we provide transportation services to people.
I would say not just residents, but also
okay.
transportation at large within the city. Knowing that we talked about sharing of resources, that's a trend and readily available. Uber, Lyft, whatever. There's short-term leases now. There's all kinds of creative solutions out there.
so really an assessment of the variety of transportation options that are available there, not just a government transit service. Yeah.
Joe, you want to talk about 6? Or Mona? And
So one of the items that, this is a comment by all department heads, is the purchasing policy. It needs to be updated. I think it was last modified maybe over a decade ago. So we have both the purchasing limits of the city manager. We're looking at revising, and I got a hold of a survey that was done by, I think it was about 70 cities participated in it. The average right now for a city manager approval authority is about 50,000. Greg is currently at 25,000, so we're half of that average of these 70 cities in California. And then just some of the language within the purchasing policy that was developed maybe in the 80s and 90s that's kind of irrelevant now, where it needs to be updated and fine-tuned. That's impeding progress within departments. Mona, if you have anything to add, feel free, please.
No, I mean, right now with your department or whatever, we're looking at actual contracts and looking at how many contracts are we processing because the limits are too low. So we're analyzing staff time to create those contracts. We're working with finance in partnership so that when finance presents it to council, we can actually give you staff time that can be improved or go on to other projects based on increasing limits.
so the departments are collaborating around trying to improve this process, and we'll be bringing it to council with some recommended changes.
And Joe, you have recommendations, you were saying this group of 70 cities, and you use the city managers as an example, but you have examples of what Mona's talking about as well for?
Yes, so I have examples of current purchasing policies that cities just recently adopted. And yes, other examples of contracts.
So it sounds like a streamlining process is what
That is part of it. And the city attorney's involved. There's a internal working group that's been meeting for a few months now. So
Okay.
there's progress.
Does require change in the municipal code.
Okay,
Council
so
approval.
council gets involved, obviously. Yeah, okay.
So,
Oh, yes,
along
Carol.
those lines, so, we're talking about changing the limits and raising the limits so that we aren't burdening departments just because we have small limits. But in addition to that, we should also be making sure that the guidelines on the decision-making of the purchases are vetted out, because this goes back to Drew's point, some of those guidelines should be, did you think from a conservation standpoint, so it's not just raising the price, you have to look at what you're empowering your manager to. When you're empowering your manager to make a decision, you just have to make sure that a manager has the guidelines set forth in front of them that you want them to make those decisions with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Are there, like the FAR, the federal acquisition requirements for government, is there something similar for municipalities that would have the types of things that Carol and Drew are
So there
suggesting?
are guidelines, yes. The framework guidelines that we can follow. And, also to add to what Carol was discussing, we're working with the Environmental Committee on maybe adding a green component into this as well. But yes, there is.
Good. Okay.
I just add,
Oh, yeah.
from Public Works perspective, I think we're the biggest contract and PO producer in our city, and we have about 200 of them. So anything that could be done to streamline my entire staff and I would love. So let me say that.
Add it to the list. Well,
Is that what we're talking about, though?
but the council approved, did increase administrative authority for Public Works not too long ago. I think it was in the last year or two. So I think what Joe's talking about is other types of contracts, not so much Public Works. But I mean, we can look at it again. But Public Works did get that increased administrative authority within the last probably 2 years. I think when Stephanie was the director.
But a purchasing policy allows even more through Greg.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right.
That's very critical because one of the things that we have on here is a long-term facilities assessment. And one of the reasons we have so many smaller contracts is because we're being reactive to all the things that we need to do. And that's citywide, for example, for our facilities.
Well, if you have a
So-
higher goal of becoming efficient in how you do things, and if this is getting in the way because of burdensome and unnecessary requirements, then if you have guidelines that are clear guidelines, you may be able to save staff time. So if that's the goal.
And, the current best practices as well. So there are guidelines for that. What are the
Yeah.
current best practices?
Yeah,
And
so-
some of our current policy language is maybe contradicting some of those best
Okay.
practices.
Okay, so rather than
Okay,
trying to
I know-
solve the problem, we're not solving the problem today.
We're gonna ride this horse till it's dead, right? But,
Only, you're the last comment, then we're going to move on.
oh, you can move on.
Go ahead.
There's a bigger picture here, though, and then it's the city's approach to risk. And right now, our approach to risk is so off the charts conservative that to do a simple in-house training, to bring a consultant on board to do a 8-hour training class in a classroom, has these huge requirements, which makes it prohibitive for us to bring people in. And from my perspective, if we could address that risk
As
and
part
come
of
more in
this.
line with what is reasonable and rational and the best business practices, I think we could do a lot better for the departments and for our staff.
Well, I'm going to tell you that in all fairness too, that might be some part of it, but another part of it, what Lily is finding, who works in the city clerk's office with her KPIs, it might be an understanding of what you need to look for, what you need to ask for, examples, better training we're starting to see maybe in asking for the risk, the insurance, the proof of insurance. So it might be a combination of both.
Okay,
Better
so
training
I'm
of
gonna,
staff.
I'm gonna cut this off because we could solve this problem. There's a lot of energy. But it sounds like it's a streamlining effort that is needed in order. So we're just trying to go through this to understand what these things are. But I didn't want to cut off the city managers.
I think there's agreement that we need to
Yeah.
update the website and have a mobile
Seven.
app and better serve our customers and provide more services online, which is also an environmental goal. And
Yeah.
this is something that's in the works that the tech committee's working on and that we're hoping to hire an ISIT director to help us work on.
Okay.
And is budgeted.
The number 8, the business center, which is underway. So as a
That is
That's
a
the-
project that is also funded.
funded
Thanks to
project.
creating a surcharge, and we hope to remodel the business license, public works, planning and building areas to be a full-service business center.
Okay.
Maybe one thing to add to that, that'll change a little bit of the details, is that that was something that was thought of in 2013, and council at the time gave staff authority to collect a surcharge on all permits to be able to save enough money to do it. It was based on estimates in 2013. That estimate probably has gone up. And what we're finding in the technology committee, there's a huge technology component to business centers. So when you throw in the cost of technology cost, I may bring an item before the council in the next few months of the council gave authority to collect that money for 5 years, and it runs out in 2018.
For construction purposes.
for construction purposes. And so I may have an item in the next couple months that goes to council to allow us to continue to collect that surcharge for a little bit longer than what the original 5-year estimator was. I just wanted to point that out.
Use it for technology.
And the ability to use it for technology and, yeah. So some of the dates may change and some of the specifics of how we get there may change, but I think it's a very important item to do. And
Okay, good. Any comments from council on any of those 1 through 8? Okay, no?
So my, on 8, I totally agree, and I just want to make sure, back to my earlier point, changing, building to change a process, changing the building structure to change a process isn't always the right order. First, you should evaluate your process, implement your system, and then retrofit your building to fit that process. So I want to make sure we do that in the right order.
And that's the focus, I think, is to
That's
provide
what I
more ability to do over-the-counter meetings and customer and
Yeah.
Because when you have a new system, things could eliminate, or if you become more online, needs that are currently there today may disappear, or new needs will become. So you need to make sure that you do. I would hate to retrofit an office space or a building space and then implement a system and all of a sudden say, hey, this isn't necessarily what we need now.
we want to get away from the traditional stand-up sort of DMV experience and to have more of a customer focus.
I'll just say that a lot of cities call themselves one-stop centers, and what they essentially done is build a physical center, and then everybody moves in, and they're all closer to each other, but their process of helping people hasn't changed. The business center that we're talking about it will completely change the way we provide that service, and it'll be very collaborative between all the departments getting together to provide a joint service level to the customer. So it'll be very different.
So Deanna and I are failing in our goal of moving this
I know.
conversation along.
But I think that may be a good example. I've made a note that could be a separate discussion with the city council at some point as an information item as to how it's going to be different. Sounds like it will be very different in the future. So, okay, so goal B, crime prevention.
So a council member suggested that
yes.
there could be
Yeah.
a community engagement component of crime prevention.
Yeah, more of an increased focus on crime prevention, including greater community engagement.
What would that look like, chiefs?
I was actually going to put that question back on the council, because I have my own vision of what community engagement is, but I'd like to hear what it is that was envisioned by the council. For example, Captain Turnbull just last week resurrected the Citizens Police Academy that was dormant for a while, which is an excellent and outstanding example of how we would engage with the community and kind of open our doors up so they can understand the process of the police department. Is that what more examples like that? Is that what we're looking for from a community engagement?
We do probably at least 2 community neighborhood watches a month on average. We had the open house recently, because I was a little confused on what more we're looking for. We're trying to keep up with those type of things.
This was not my item, but I agree that we should be enhancing the community. Like, I'm happy that you guys are re-engaging that program, because I know some of our volunteer officer, group is aging out, and we need to re-infuse that a little bit, and maybe lower the parameters so that people can get involved in it. And like I said, this wasn't mine, but I'm happy to hear that you're.
Those examples that you're given are certainly things that we're doing. We brought on 2 or 3 additional volunteer seniors, and so.
Can we come back on the 8th, maybe with some ideas about?
I think so.
Some thoughts on what we already do and some thoughts on what we could add.
I have a question for Captain
Sure.
Turnbull. Is your academy, is that like the reserve officers we used to have back in the day?
The issue with the reserve academy, you're talking about the reserve police officers, like putting someone through a full police academy, the rules have changed for that.
Right.
So that's not something, this is strictly opening our doors to community members that want to learn more about the organization and learn more about our people, and humanizing the badge really is what it's about.
educating the public.
So we'll develop what we already do and maybe some thoughts on what could be added on
Good.
for the 8th.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Pedestrian safety plan, I think, came out of concerns primarily around Main Street, and we do have an item on the next agenda, right, Ken, to replace the 4 lighted crosswalks on Main Street, but there's also some thought about whether we need to be installing lighted crosswalks or pedestrian safety measures elsewhere in the city.
But this is about developing a whole plan. Is that, I mean,
I'm not familiar with this one.
okay, well, this came to me from one of the 5 council members, and I don't recall who it was, but developing a pedestrian safety plan.
I've probably talked about crosswalks,
Yeah.
but I don't remember about a
plan.
comprehensive pedestrian plan.
Okay, maybe.
We could restripe Main Street, do traffic calming, so.
So if this is really more about enhancing pedestrian safety,
I think there's some areas in town where we are vulnerable, like Grand Avenue going down the hill from Teen Center, skaters, etc. Traffic at Beach Max. We already have 1 crosswalk there at Total Baseball. We're also vulnerable on Main. Those
Okay.
new crosswalks will help that, but I mean, cars are going, in my experience, too fast on Main, and not seeing people on the crosswalk currently. And so I just think there's some other areas where we're vulnerable, but I
There's
don't.
concerns around the middle school.
Yeah, the middle school as well,
Around the
exactly.
schools, so.
okay.
Well, and I think too, like with the changing, back to our point about the changing environment, where you're getting now a lot of Uber, Lyft drivers that weren't driving in our town, all of a sudden driving in our town. Maybe we, have some signage, that you're entering El Segundo, this is a safe zone area, so that we start putting it out there that we are on a safe zone town, and I don't know, making our speed limit signs bigger or more visible. I think that's what's happening is you're having a lot more people driving in our town that didn't drive in our town before. And so we need to educate them on who our town is and why, And so one of the things that's not on here, but it's like the whole like parking enforcement, just, there's a lot, I'm not sure how much we enforce our rules as far as like 20-minute parking zones and, 2-hour parking zones. I have a feeling there's, yeah. You got a ticket?
I got a ticket.
Did you get a ticket?
Apparently we enforce. That's funny.
I got a ticket.
She got a ticket too.
When, today?
I will be making my donation.
Today?
Wow.
Oh, there
Apart
it
from the lot
goes.
process.
Keep the signs on. You cheap.
Okay, so the way that I've captured this, it sounds like it wasn't stated correctly as a pedestrian safety plan. So I've reframed it. I think I'm hearing enhance pedestrian safety in certain areas, so identify what those areas are. And then including perhaps some safety reminders for people who are new to El Segundo. So that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, I think. Drew?
Just, we've been talking about what's the South Bay Bicycle Coalition, and part of COG, and, figuring out bike paths, master bike plan. My suggestion would be that we broaden that a little bit to be pedestrian and bicycles. It's already something that we're talking about, but they.
Okay, and bike safety.
They're getting in the way of the cars or vice versa.
Yeah, pedestrian and bike, I added that, okay. Okay, become a city's prepared to respond to emergencies and disasters. Let's see, that
We've
was-
filled a critical position, and Randy Collins is going to be focusing on training this year, and every staff person is going to be involved in one level or another who's got a responsibility. So that's going to be a focus. We're going to be asking people to take time away from their day-to-day jobs to train this year, and that's going to be somewhat different for some of our people who haven't been trained in recent years. So we are committed to that. Randy has identified, and it's really going to be an issue of how quickly do we want to become fully prepared, because he has identified some training opportunities, not for himself, but for the rest of us, that will help us become prepared quicker. So there's going to be a policy question that we're going to start by asking the disaster council of, do you want to put additional money into staff training this year so that we can become prepared sooner rather than later?
Okay. Question from council? No? Okay, 4, the CAD system.
You want to speak to that, Chris?
We're part of a regional dispatch center, and the regional dispatch center is implementing a new computer-aided dispatch system. So this is a mandate for us. If we want to continue to get our police and fire resources to have radio communication, which is critically important, we need to implement the CAD. So there's also another piece of it, it's a records management system that goes along with it. And the third piece is we're in the process of changing our frequencies in which our radios work on. And so all 3 of those are mandates, they're critically important, and they're occurring over the next 12 to 18 months.
And we're 60% funded or something like that?
Probably about that, maybe a little 60, 80%. I don't know exactly how.
We need some additional
We
funding.
need additional funding.
We do have equipment replacement to cover a portion of it, or grants, or
And they're big ticket items.
Yeah.
Okay. And then-
automated license plate readers.
And the next one? Is that?
Just
Is that a
for
point?
that, in the comment section, it said it's authorized in the budget or whatever, but if you say you have half of it authorized, it'd be nice to have that knowledge in your comment there.
I think there was initially a request for 3 years, 125 for 3 years, for a total of 375, plus an IS specialist was attached to that. There was a body attached to that, and I know the 125 got approved in the budget, but it got put in the parking lot, because of the tech committee. And this is not a new system, it's an enhancement to our existing mobile system.
So this isn't a matter of the tech committee's going to find a better product. This is what all the
It's
Well, I
what
think the-
region, it's what
right.
Torrance has put 40 cameras up, Hawthorne's put a few up, Gardena. So it's a regional, LA County, it's a regional.
Oh, we're on the license plate
5.
readers. Okay.
It's 5.
And wasn't number 5 tied to the expansion of the wiring? The broadband? No? Okay.
It was tied to an IS specialist.
So those are both in the CIP, but they're on hold? Is that what the situation is, or 4 or 5?
I think that both the police and fire departments are working on an ongoing basis on the CAD system with the other
Okay.
South Bay cities.
Okay.
And we will need some additional funding, and we have no
Funding.
choice there.
Okay.
Automated license plate reader is something that we feel strongly about, that we'd like to do, that we have some funding set aside for, but we don't currently have the staff authorized or the staff time to implement it.
And well, we have, we actually have automated license plate readers installed on our units. They're just not working as effectively as they can be because the computer system isn't where it needs to be, and that's where the money's needed. So it's not buying new stuff, or is there some new stuff that's part of it?
Yeah, this came
Okay.
out of, I think when some of the council walked last year, a lot of the increase in crime, the community was outpouring, some support for this type of technology. And what happened was, a lot of our technology, we didn't have the bodies to support it. And so principally, we actually applied a IS specialist to this project. But could it operate independently? Yes. If you said, hey, here's the money, we could contact Vigilant, who's an outside contractor, and start up our regional approach to adding some fixed cameras to intersections. But principally, we didn't want to take on more technology and operate it horribly without the support.
So this may be something that at the next session would be, is that an appropriate item for the next session to discuss, or is that going to come up during the allocation of the budget?
I think it's more of a budget conversation around adding additional positions.
Oh, I see, okay. So it's a budget discussion, okay. I just wanted to be clear about that. Okay, all right,
And getting the IS department fully staffed.
okay. All right, so goal C, develop as a choice employer and a choice workforce.
I think we would all like to have the labor negotiations completed.
Yeah, that's a big yes. And then number 2, and a number of council members certainly mentioned employee development and engagement in a variety of different ways. And So any questions on that one? I mean, as a priority, okay. Number 3, an employee survey. It sounds like that's planned. Okay. Let's see, 4 and 5, Greg, any comments?
Can we talk about timing on that one, Greg?
Okay. Timing on 3. The employee survey.
Lynn, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually have been doing some work on that, so it's in the works, and I believe that I had indicated that I was going to kind of give you an overview of, you know, what my recommendations would be on the 18th. And so
That'll be a council or city council meeting?
I guess I'll have to just, what the right forms be.
Is it going to be on the agenda, or is this just a?
Well, if there's agreement that now is a good time to do it, Lynn can develop a survey methodology and we can launch that.
Because we did authorize this last year, right?
We put it in the work program. I don't know that we budgeted anything for it. I think we were thinking about doing it internally.
Yeah, I don't think any momentum was made on that just because of the staff resources at that time and the focus on filling vacancies. But I do think I have a mechanism that can allow us to move out that'll be very robust. It would require some resources in the way of funding.
So I think we need to develop a survey. It's really important to have at least 3 levels for employees, or 4 maybe. One is just their immediate situation, and then their management, and then the city management, and then I think the electeds. Because it's important to know that the city manager, and we give direction to the city manager, and he gives direction to his department managers. But that, you know, a lot of the direction comes from us, and the department managers and the city manager don't have control over that. So if people have an issue with something, it should be directed at the proper level or the proper people.
I agree with that point. Otherwise, it's kind of difficult to know, you know, exactly what level they're perhaps speaking to.
Right. That happened with my previous manager, or company. They hired Gallup for an engagement survey, and everybody was grossly unhappy with the ELT, the leadership team, but they loved their managers, but the only way they could
see what you're saying.
vent was at their managers and not at the executive leadership team.
Right. Yeah, I've experienced
Yeah.
similar things as well. So it's a very valid point.
So we can get this in place,
I think pretty quickly, as long as, you know, I was hoping to give you kind of an idea. I was looking to give sort of an idea of what I was envisioning and where I was going. Those are some of the things I factored in. Also some feedback for council on a component of it. And then if we are heading in the right direction, then I can bring it to council for formal approval along with any, you know.
Or does council just want us to move forward with?
I think we should do it last month.
Okay. There's your direction.
So I can just go ahead and pull it together and then we'll work to get it on the agenda.
You've got some good experience doing this.
Yeah, I have quite a bit of experience.
Good.
I have something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, not about that, but on the whole, can I just get from, I know Greg's heard me 1,000 times, if not a million. Can I just get the department heads' opinion of our hiring policies? And, because we're constantly having a shortage of employees because when we have open vacancies, and no offense, it's not to anybody or it's more just the policies that we've established. And I know there's, we have a code that we have to.
1962.
And I feel like it's burdensome how we move forward and how we hire people. And I feel it prevents us from hiring good quality people that may not have city government experience. So I want to hear from the department heads. Do you feel frustration, or are you happy with the policy and how we hire? Or, you know, I seem to be the only sole voice speaking to this, but I know when we're not filling positions, it's worrisome to me. So can the people speak out and talk about it?
I think every department head would like to have their positions filled as quickly as possible. We're really talking about a process.
I'm talking about the process. So like the current process where we have to have this panel of outside people doing, interviewing. So as a department head, I feel, a lot of decision making is taken away from me as a department head, say if I have identified a person that I want this candidate because I feel this person is ready, but if this panel doesn't pick them, I can't promote them, and I just want to, please, I mean, department heads speak up. This would be your time to share with, maybe we should reevaluate the process.
As an alternative, can I suggest an alternative, Carol? Because
Yeah.
I think I definitely think you're onto something, and I have my own concerns about the HR municipal code and some of the limitations. Maybe we bike rack that, and bless you. Maybe we put together a task force of all the department heads to brainstorm, and maybe that's one of the action items here is what can we do to improve the hiring process, the quality and the speed.
Yeah,
And the city.
and the city attorney, of course, I mean, of course, we'll follow. Yeah.
I don't want to bring it back up, but I will. The procurement process and everything else, there's policies and procedures and things that maybe be cumbersome that people need to change, and that ought to happen outside of this meeting.
Yeah.
But that's continued change. We have to be able to adapt to those things. So-
Absolutely. Well, that's right, and so that could certainly be a bike rack item for the city manager and the department heads to work on, because there's not a hiring process on this planet that is perfect, that's for sure. But, so there.
Maybe to Carol's point, it's important enough that it is a line item, a priority, potentially.
Well, but I think you've already got filled vacant positions, and the city manager's delegated the responsibility of making sure that positions are delegated. That's his responsibility.
I feel that our current practice or policies
Sure.
are prevent us from hiring the best candidates. I mean, you can't break in if you don't have city experience. There's no way you can get a job here because you don't have city experience. And I'm not saying, we were talking earlier about that our pool of people is getting smaller, and we have to be open to, if you have a candidate that's good but doesn't have city experience, well, you can always train someone how to do a job, and as long as they have understanding of a function, then they should be able to be a candidate for that position. But I feel our filters are so stringent that we're eliminating candidates in a pool that we shouldn't be eliminating. And I really feel, I've heard this from department heads or departments, and that's why I'm trying to be their voice, but I think there's frustration on our current policy on how we hire people.
If I just make a real quick comment. So I know, I've hired multiple people since I've been here already, but one of the frustrations I have is when you post a job, and let's say you get 100 applicants, as a department head, you're not allowed to look through those applicants and say, these are the individuals I want to move on. So I think if that flexibility can somehow be incorporated into the process, that would be very helpful.
If we could do, to Drew's point, do a task force with the department heads and HR and the lawyers and say, what should our process be like so that we have the ability as a department head to make decisions. We talked about raising the bar of how much money we can spend. We should be able to decide if candidates are good, or if we do see a resume that we like, or we know somebody that we've worked with before, we should be able to bring that person in. And if we can trust them to spend our money, we should be trusting our people to hire the right person. And that if they're not hiring the right person, that's a different issue. So I feel our processes are very prohibitive, and that's why we have so many open positions.
I also think we're held to a higher standard because these are public positions.
I get it. I'm just
that we can't play favorites, and it has to be a level playing ground, and there has to be some, the transparency, but there also has to be like some blind down select process.
That's the idea, and it doesn't lend itself to a quick process, right?
But maybe to Chief's point, maybe it is too risk averse. I mean, maybe we've created this ridiculously onerous process that doesn't need to be that way.
Well,
There's
let me
a
just
possibility that's
say,
good.
I think the goal that I'm hearing is to be able to efficiently and effectively fill those vacancies, hire good people. You don't want just anybody off the street. You want a good person, great people to work for the city of El Segundo. And so if the objective is then to improve the hiring process so you can do that, then that could go on your list of priorities. But that's really at the city manager and the department head level to try to figure out that process. except where it can be, maybe there's some city ordinances, I don't know. You know,
There's a voter-adopted civil service code that.
Okay, so
we
there
need to
may
look
be
at.
some things that.
That's our own people, so if we feel
Yeah.
that is outdated, then we as a city should be bringing that back to the voters and say, do we need to modify this? Because I feel that we're holding ourselves back by having antiquated laws, and we're not bringing the,
Okay.
you know.
So I put on there to identify impediments, because there
Yes.
may be some impediments in your civil service code or whatever it is. Good. Okay. Good.
We do hire great people, by the way.
Yeah, you do. You've got great people here.
And more they're coming from the private sector, just, I think, as a nature of the
Okay.
pool.
So let's just, so we're doing pretty well. So let's move on to goal D. I'm gonna move us a little bit faster here. So goal D1, successful implementation of new technology. I've heard a lot about the work that's being done and a lot of need for technology implementation. So that's clearly a priority. I've been hearing that from everybody. Any questions on that one?
Tech committee is going to be coming forward with their recommendations. We had a very collaborative work session where the department heads presented and weighed in on voted on their options. So we're going to need to mesh these two sets of recommendations and compare it against the available resources and prioritize.
Okay, very good. And D2, develop a plan to utilize increased transportation
This is
funding.
what Joe was referring to, that we have a dedicated stream of funding going forward for street improvement projects. And I would like Joe and Ken to work together to prioritize how they're going to use those funds for the next 5 years or so.
Okay. And then 3, Ken, you had mentioned this already, the facilities needs assessment.
Right, it's definitely a critical need for the city. We have old facilities, and we're being reactive to repairs, and a lot of that has to do with falling behind from the Great Recession and lack of funding and staff resources. So this was part of the CPAC discussion last year, which was moved forward, and I understand didn't go forward in the current year. So to clue everybody in, the current CPAC, we were thinking, I believe we looked to, based on a little more research, cut that budget in half. So that's going to be coming before CPAC one more time, and then Planning Commission, and then in August, and Council in September. And then we could hear where that priority falls in. But it's definitely something, I'll say similar to our payment management system, where every year that goes by, things get more expensive, and it's definitely interruptions to all staff for repairs.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, yes, Meredith, you had a question.
Yeah, this is my question on adding things. I mean, for the Recreation and Parks Department, our main priority moving forward for this next year is to develop and implement the operations plan for the new aquatic center. So that, I don't know if this is the right place, if it should be on this list. I mean,
Customer service.
somewhere, I would imagine we'd want to reference that.
So added. She's suggesting that we add a priority under, I guess, customer service, right?
Or infrastructure, yeah, I don't know the either or.
What is it that you get? What is it that you get?
What do you mean?
So that's an operations and management plan for the aquatic center.
Making sure we
On the downtown staff, and there was a conversation that I had to recuse myself from, but staff will be working on setting up a plan to deal with the stakeholders and develop some options for beautification downtown. Obviously, that also requires money. So that'll be factored in. But the first step is to get, I think, a group together and talk about what can happen, and then assess how much it's going to cost and figure out how to pay for it. The marketing component for downtown, Barbara and EDAC have a piece of that, and we'll be folding into a plan for marketing.
Can I have a question on that?
Oh, yes, of course.
So, what director is going to be the lead on that downtown? And the reason why I say that, because I'm sure you were going to say Meredith, And Mayor, I'm just concerned.
I wasn't going to say.
Oh, you were going to say Mayor, because I feel like we have the Parks and Rec Department has so many things going on right now. And I meant to interject this in the technology standpoint. I mean, I feel we have a bit of we're heading towards some troubled waters with technology. Though we have this technology committee and they're very, great, we have this huge bottleneck of we're really down in our IT support staff. And we haven't been able to hire this director, and we've lost another IT specialist, right? And so we're down to how many people? 3 people in the whole IT. We have 50 50 identified projects from an IT standpoint that's probably going to cost us about $2 million with lots of IT hours, and we have 3 people. So I want to make sure that everyone clearly understands the IT committee, they're a volunteer group and they're helping us organize, but it's not going to get these things implemented until we get the staffing and the funding. And there's a lot of things riding on getting this done. And I want to make sure that each of these items that we're putting on here have an owner, and it's an owner that actually can accommodate it. Because I know with Meredith, she's got the pool, she's got Topgolf, she's got a new system, plus Centennial. There's a lot going on there, and we need to have ownerships identified for each of these. So I want this downtown to happen because I think it can happen fairly quickly if we just put some effort into it, but we need to have an owner, and who's that going to be, that owner?
And the logical spot for that to occur would be after the prioritization and the tier 1 and tier 2, and then the council determines these are the things that you're going to move ahead on. Then that would be a good time for the city manager to designate the owner for any of these.
I'm trying to protect Meredith because
she's got a look. I see that. Meredith has a friend.
But I do want to warn everybody in the city that, especially at the staff, and our council, that I have major concerns about technology. I just sense that it's going to take us a couple more months, 3-4 months to get a director on board. We have a lot of things pegged to happen, and the entrance to the bottle is the opening is pretty small.
Yeah. Okay. Your economic development strategic plan.
I'll let Barbara speak to that. Provide a status update?
Sure. So we
Stand up so you can be seen on TV here.
Oh, on TV. Okay, lipstick on. So over the last 3 months, okay, not very good with time these days. So over the last few months, the Economic Development Advisory Council has been working with a consultant to help develop the framework for a strategic plan. Al Kiahi and I worked together on prioritization and along the lines of what we're doing here, but specific to economic development. So we started out with 8 goals that we all discussed and hashed out, and narrowed it down to 4 key goals in economic development that we want to focus on. Under each goal, there's actions, there's prioritization, there's responsible party, there's EDAC's role, staff role, city council's role, and then outside, because we have a marketing firm that we're working with. So our 4 goals are hospitality and tourism, enhance hospitality and tourism, bring more people into the hotels, and have our guests visit more locations within the city as well. Business retention and expansion is the second one, and that is keeping our businesses here, working with business visits and talking to businesses and addressing any problems that they may have at a citywide level. New business attraction is always a key priority, filling in vacancies that we have, trying to bring in businesses that will continue to sustain our economy and our base of revenue from a business tax perspective, and also create the kind of quality jobs that we're looking for. And then finally is strategic and forward planning. So what is the role of economic development in the overall planning efforts for the city? So that's where we are on that.
And council's going to see it. There's going to be a presentation.
Yes, so at our July 19th EDAC meeting, Al and I will present the work plan
and then the entire EDAC council right now is reviewing that work plan and looking at the prioritizations that we've set and determining whether or not they agree with everything. So we'll kind of finalize all of that at the July 19th meeting. Then the EDAC will vote to accept it, and City Council will be there as well to review and accept it, and then we'll move forward on implementation from there.
So, City Council goes to that meeting on the
Yes.
19th?
Yes.
Where is it?
That's a good question.
What time
I
is
think
it?
it's going to be at the Automobile Driving Museum, and it's 4:30 to 6.
Okay,
But you will receive an invitation by Thursday.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from council members on that item?
Yeah, he continues to do great things.
Good.
I'm glad that they've been working with the consultant to formulate this. And look forward to hearing their suggestions next week.
Sounds exciting. That's great.
There's one thing
Oh.
that I wanted to actually just ask for advice on is, complete the economic development strategic plan and continue to attract new business. It may be useful to take some of the goals and actions that we have developed in our strategic plan and add them to the list here, rather than just having this big general, just to develop the plan is step one. We're kind of there. We've got the framework, so would like to see some of the goals within that plan become priorities of the city.
We can do that.
Sure. Sounds good.
Addressing pension liability, we discussed with the ad hoc committee and some recommendations that will likely be coming forward as part of the budget discussion about potentially pre-funding certain things, or refinancing. Want to add anything, Joe? No.
Okay.
Begin the general plan update. So this is both a process issue and also something that EDAC has promoted. Greg McLean and Sam Lee will be coming forward to council with a agenda item that will discuss what the general plan update would consist of, how long it would take, how much it would potentially cost, how much money. Again, this is another area where the city had the forethought to put a surcharge on building permits to pay for a general plan update. We have $600,000 or so right now available. It costs more than $600,000. It costs $1 to $1.5 million. So we're going to talk to council about some options for pre-funding a process or stretching a process out over a couple of years so that we could begin a general plan update and have some longer-term land use conversations. One potential option, well, there are two options that we're looking at. One is to go get an MTA grant or a SCAG grant to pay for part of it. The second would be, since we have and I know I'm getting into the details, but since we have a dedicated funding source through this surcharge, could we borrow money from another city fund and pay ourselves back with that dedicated funding source over the next 4 years in order to get the process started?
Yeah.
So that's a policy question. Policy question number one is, do we want to do a general plan update? Policy question number two is, when and how are we going to pay for it? The good news is that we do have a dedicated funding source that will eventually pay for it.
Is there a sunset date on that funding source?
I think so.
And when is that coming back then?
You're going to bring it in August?
In August.
Second meeting August?
In August, okay. Is that before or after August 8th?
After.
After August
The
8th?
15th, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, Karen.
just real quick, on the general plan, when was the last one and why does it have to cost so much money? I just want to, is that just because this is the way it's always been done? Or, we're supposed to be innovative, think big, can we be looking at the general plan and say, what components should we be focusing on at a smaller price? Because we have so many other initiatives that we need to accomplish. And funding that, IT, number one, has to be up, our city is behind in IT, that I would hate to spend money on surveys and stuff that aren't really necessary. So is there can we really dissect the general plan and say, here's our 2 target or 4 target areas, rather than doing a whole general fund, and maybe do a staged, I don't know the process very well, but I just want to make sure we're looking at it not from the traditional approach, but from a new approach.
I think that's a great question, Carol, and that's one of the items that's really going to be in the discussed at the at our presentation. Notably, what are we trying to achieve?
Right.
Right. So if there's some changes we want to make on the east side of town, the grant that we're trying to get right now that Greg mentioned. We're getting that in hopes of trying to do something, creating a specific plan, or having some sort of plan on the east side of town, because it's related to Metro. They're very, it's related to changes made to the Metro stations, right? So if there are specific changes that we want to study and identify what changes we want to make, and if those changes are achieved by the study that's related to the Metro grant, and if that is the big chunk of why we're thinking of doing a general plan, we may achieve that goal, right? So we will discuss all of that as in the presentation in the second in August.
And we are talking about ideally no general fund dollars going into the ultimate price tag for this.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's a big project. Okay, number 5.
That's, in my mind, related to
Uh-huh.
number 4, which is a major policy change like allowing mixed use on the east side of town would be part of a general plan effort if we get direction to move forward with updating the general plan.
And on that, I really think we need to survey the residents. This cannot be a decision that's made just by city staff, or this really should go to the voters.
And a general plan effort would include a really, really robust public outreach component.
I mean, it keeps coming up, but we just really need to get.
Surveying the residents and going to the voters are two different things.
Yeah.
So, and again, surveying the residents, you have to make sure then that
all residents.
It's everybody, so.
Right. I mean, I just.
We're here to represent them, aren't we?
Correct, but if we have outreach to different components, again, I'll go back to seniors not being online, that we have to make sure that we see, that all aspects of our residents have a voice and not just people on Facebook.
So I guess
Right.
part of the.
Like you, Dawn.
Part of the question maybe for next time is whether or not 4 and 5 are actually different. I mean, I don't know. But you don't have to make that determination today. But when we do any sorting next time, you might determine whether those are combined or should be combined into one question.
The next one, the ordinance has been approved. Planning and Building has, would like to track sort of the impacts and the reactions to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and then report back to council at some point, maybe 6 months in the future. Advocating city concerns around LAX expansion is an ongoing part of what we seem to be faced with. So.
Are there any council comments on that one?
I'm just wondering why it hasn't been on the list before. We've just decided, I think, in closed session, given what's come up, whether to do it or not.
So to do what?
Well, this is advocate against, or, advocate for the city regarding the impacts. We've been doing that.
To me, it's part of our core,
dependent.
almost part of our core function as a
Right.
neighbor, right?
Right, that's.
Well, and if-
But so many things have happened recently, and the Terminal 2 and 3
Yeah.
expansion. I mean, there was sort of a lull for a while where our issues were RSI and LAWA and FAA. And now there's LAMP, and there's the Sandbox, and there's Terminals 2 and 3. There's so many more things that.
I agree. Is it because we're anticipating spending more potentially? It's why we're adding it as a potential budget line item?
Well, the reason it's on this list is that in my interviews with council members, it was mentioned as really important for next year. So that's the reason it's on this list. Yeah. Number 8.
The trash contract is expiring, how far up? Ken?
It was October 2018.
So we would normally start a RFP process?
In summary, to pull back a bit, this was something that I kind of briefed the environmental committee on, actually, a few meetings ago. And the chicken and egg thing is, I think, very soon, we'd like to go to the residents with a survey and see what they want. We all know there are, in everybody's eyes, pluses and minuses to the service we have now. And we've been having that, as the comments say, pretty much forever. And kind of need to see what the people want, and I would think the environmental, in the notes I'm looking at, the environmental committee actually used to be the environmental and trash committee, so that could be an angle to take that on as a subcommittee sort of thing. But it's starting this summer, and speaking to, even back to our unfunded mandates, where we're kind of behind the 8 ball with Cal Recycle, and we have 25 haulers for our commercial recycling, and going to even our PO and contract comment of getting a consultant on board to take a look at our entire solid waste and recycling programs, from the mandates to trash. And I've identified someone, so I think I want to get that firm on board pretty quickly. So I think the clock is pretty much ticking very shortly now to get this going.
So there's a few issues, right? There's who pays for trash service in the city on a go-forward basis. There's how is the service provided? We still hand throw cans, which is more expensive than paying for an automated service. The automated service would potentially allow us to have some other components. And there's still the issue out there of the 3 and 4 unit, and I know you won't get this, but 3 and 4 unit properties are currently getting free trash service. Our municipal code only requires us to provide it today to 1 and 2 unit properties. So that is a change that we'd like to talk to council about.
There's lots of talk about.
Okay.
So is there really a question of who pays for it? Didn't we already answer that question about 2011 or so? The city pays for it.
I understood. Yes, the city pays.
Do we want to ask the question again?
So why do we want to ask people what they want? They're not paying for it. They get what they get. We're paying for it.
So if
Why do we
that's
wanna
the
survey
council,
'em?
Dr. Brand, if that's the council direction that we're going to continue to pay for it, then we might not want to provide the more expensive service of hand
That's what I'm
throwing
saying.
cans anymore.
Right.
And there's unlimited, there are several, I mean, we can really get down to the weeds in this,
Weeds, yeah.
but unlimited bulky pickup, for example, people love their trash guy, he's the best guy ever, and then they hate him another day, and there's blight in front of me because everybody just throws their bags out. There's a lot of interesting issues, and
We'd have to go to an election, wouldn't we, David? We already went down that road. We got about 3,000 protest letters.
I think it was just a survey.
We've been.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have to.
No.
was it a proposition? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prop 218.
It sounds like it requires professional analysis, because if on a variety of issues, how you're providing the service, what techniques you're using, as well as who pays for it is one line of inquiry, but a major line of inquiry is what does it cost because of how you're providing the service. And what I'm hearing you say is you want to start the study.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I'll say from Public Works perspective, it doesn't make sense for the city to be paying for a service that's contracted out. If we're gonna have residents pay for trash to the city to administer a contract, it shouldn't be a contract, it should be city services. So as everybody knows, most cities, you're responsible for your own trash. And
Hey, but
most
Dr.
cities.
Zinelli will write here in El Segundo, you get your trash picked up for free, okay?
Yeah.
That's what it means to live here.
Mhm.
Just ask me.
I understand.
The other South Bay mayors to an event.
Yeah.
And one of them, who works for the county, thought we were the only one of 2 cities in the state who don't charge for trash pickup.
Us and
San Diego. Yeah, that's what that Sam says, Sam Pena. We're unique.
Yeah, you're unique.
There are 40 whatever cities, we and Rancho Palos Verdes, PDE, Rolling Hills Estates, are the only ones who hand toss.
Might be rolling.
So you will have some interesting conversations, that's all I can tell.
And I think it's more of an education.
Yeah.
You know, and it's to Ken's point, it's like we really need to do a proper survey.
Right.
Educate the people on, this is our current service, this is the cost of the city. This is what we'd like to go to. It's greener, it's more automated, it's cleaner, it's more visually better, you know, with the better standardized cans. And we can save money as a total, but we'd like you to pick it up. But we have to educate, and there's a whole
Absolutely.
presentation needs to
Yeah.
be done, because if you could educate the population to say, if everybody paid their $30 for trash, maybe we could bring on another fire department or another fire team or
They don't
police
care about
departments.
any of that.
But, you know, but it's
Asked and
education.
answered.
We can ask them, right?
No, it's asked and answered.
But clearly, it'll
They've
take
done that.
some substantial staff work and professional analysis and education, so whatever you end up doing.
That's how you spin
So,
this away.
yeah. Okay, so Top Golf, resolving that question.
Prioritize it.
It's coming to Planning Commission Thursday, or City Planning Commission on Thursday, and potentially, depending on how the process goes, to City Council on August 15th.
Okay. And then is that number 10 as well? Is that?
10 is related,
Is it?
but
Okay.
either way, there will be a continued 9-hole golf course that's owned by the city, and we want to look at options for how that's managed and the structure around that,
Yeah, okay,
that management deal.
good. And then 11, options for increased revenue.
You want to talk about business, we have some direction to look at the business license tax. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so this is, again, this is going to be a policy discussion. We have various avenues that we're looking at, but one, we've been directed by council to look at the business license tax, and those discussions have already started internally. In fact, we just met earlier this week with city attorney, city manager, and several departments involved in the discussion. And we'll probably be developing a proposal and moving forward with that recommendation, bring it before council within the next 2 months.
Okay.
And there was fee component.
Cost recovery,
And that's kind of tied to, because we'd have to get a vote on that. So we have to
Right.
align
Up to
that
18.
timeline to the election. So it's imperative that we follow the timeline to make
Correct.
sure we get it done in time for
right.
the vote.
And the election is uncertain too, because I believe city clerk is bringing an item before council next council meeting on moving the election date. So the timing of that's gonna, could change as well.
Okay.
So there's various revenue options that we'll be bringing before council. Some of it's going to be tied to the pension ad hoc committee as well. And so these will be coming up with budget discussions and also probably the beginning of the new fiscal year.
Okay. And then number 12, is that your water and sewer
Probably more
study?
Ken's item. Our
What is
our
it?
current water rates are expiring.
They get through fiscal year 18-19, so kind of June 2018, we would hire a consultant, August bring some recommended rates to the council and do a Prop 218 ballot in the fall 2018, so we could adopt rates in January of 19.
Okay.
Every 5 years? Every 5 years.
And then number 13, research options. Is that yours, Joe?
Yes.
Okay.
So we currently belong to ICRMA as our risk pool for our general liability insurance, workers' comp insurance. We use a third-party administrator, TPA, to oversee both of those general liability and workers' comp programs. And so I've been here with the city for about a year, and I think there's definitely efficiencies that we can look at to tighten up both those programs, and that's what this is involved around, which will have efficiencies and cost savings to the city.
Great. Good. Any questions from council on any of those on the last few that we've talked about? Okay. So we have gone through our overview, and we are actually slightly ahead of schedule.
So real quick,
Yes.
just, but to Meredith's point, can we add the aquatics?
Yeah, I made it.
Okay, are you going to put it to this back end piece?
Yeah.
Like similar to Topgolf, this determine policy of Lakes Golf Course Management Contract, the aquatic center and the management of the aquatic center should fall right there.
Yeah, should it be in that category of E?
Yeah, I mean, because it's
Yeah,
a change, it's a completely new business model for us.
Yeah.
It's a new facility. It's similar to the Topgolf and the golf
Okay,
course.
yeah, I did capture it though as a new one. We'll figure out exactly where to put that.
Total, right?
Pardon me?
You added 4 or 5 things total, I think, right?
No, I only added one new one. These are just comments, and there's some clarifications. Actually, there were a lot of clarifications, but one new one, which is that aquatic center.
Okay.
That
I thought
was-
we were going to add, looking at our hiring.
Oh, I
process and-
added that as a clarification or an expansion of the filling
one.
vacancies.
Okay.
So that as opposed to a brand-new one. And then so there were a lot of clarifications on these, and I'll get all these typed up, and then we can reframe these. So what I will do is I'll type up these notes, and then we will do another version of this, which has some slightly modified language that reflects this conversation. It's some clarifications, and then Meredith will add that one that you mentioned on the aquatic center, and we'll call it Meredith's goal. Okay, so let me just kind of go through the next steps, and then Greg, I'll give you a chance to talk. So after the day, I'll prepare some notes, and then I'll work with the staff in getting everything ready for next week. We'll have the strategic planning session next week. That's when we'll do some dot voting, and then look for council consensus on direction on Tier 1, Tier 2, and then what should be placed on a future list. And then after that, then I'll be preparing a report that really covers both of the sessions, but the decisions out of that one. And then the staff will be preparing the budget based on that direction. And then what else happens, Greg?
Then we go forward. I
Okay.
think that the real challenge every year is picking out of these, 40 important things to do, which ones rise to the top of, Tier 1, I guess we're calling them now, and what is the capacity of staff to get these things done?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And that's where on this one is going to be so important next week. So after we do the dot voting and we see what the council's interest is in terms of Tier 1 and Tier 2, then the department heads and Greg really will need to help validate in terms of the resource capability, whether those things can move forward because of having sufficient capacity. So I said next week.
August 8th,
Next
right?
session, thank you.
Okay.
Next session. It's not next week,
Just don't want to miss anything.
no. Okay. Next session. So I would like to offer council members an opportunity and department heads to make any closing comments yourselves about today's session, what was useful to you, particularly so that as Greg and Joe and I are planning not the next week's session, but the August 8th session, that we can make any improvements in the process. So, Mayor, would you like to make any comments about today?
I think this was very effective. I'm looking forward to the dot exercise because we have a lot of priorities here.
Yes, we
And
do.
I think this is going to be pedal to the metal with each of us coming up with 5 or 6. And I'm interested in what that distribution is going to look
Yes.
like, how aligned we are on some things and then how spread out on the others. So I appreciate everybody's participation. And I'm especially interested to hear what our department managers have to say too, and council. So-
Good, good. I'll go to the council first, and then I'll offer department heads an opportunity to comment. Councilmember, Mike?
I'm, more of a listener and trying to figure things out as we go through this. A quick note here was, when I heard Drew talk about the environmental piece, right? It's an important piece that's not getting addressed. And to me, it's because I'm not hearing it the right way, probably, but there's issues with that. and I think we can resolve that easily moving forward, so I'm glad to hear that. I'm grateful that Meredith was able to point out something about, to me, that wasn't really clear before. You know, you hear about this, it's the small pool of potential resources out there, and I look at the kids graduating from college that can't get jobs and all the other stuff, and I struggle with that, understanding that, to be honest with you, that it's a hard pool out there. But then she said, because it's a hard pool out there, the people are draining our pool here, stealing people from, that have been skilled, have been moved up through the system here. So our people are getting pulled out. So that tells me that there is an issue out there that has to be dealt with, and I think there's some opportunities there that hopefully we can get through. And I hear about frustration with the hiring processes and some other things, and to me, that's not a strategic issue. The concepts behind that are strategic. The risk is a strategic side of it, but the policies and the procedures, I would encourage the department heads and the city manager to get together and streamline that stuff without the council. That's, to talk about the incremental risks we bring, and we'll deal with that issue. But the procedures and the things, that some of the delegations of authority, those things too, as long as the accountability and goes with it, I want to support that. I want to delegate. I want to bring people up and give them more authority and more responsibility. And encourage you to bring the lawyers in at the end, because they tell you what you can't do more than what you can do. Sorry, David. But don't be afraid. Don't be so risk adverse. Let's look at what would it take and what are our real risks in some of these things, and you have to look at those. And it's easy to say what you shouldn't do or what you can't do. It's hard to say what can I do, and that's a good discussion to have. And the only other thing that to me a little bit, that I see a little bit, is it's in the back of my head here. It talks about we want to be good to our customers, right? And to me, I have the same response that I have to the environmental piece of it. When I hear customers, I lose track of what the mayor talks about. We have the senior citizens, we have the residents, the other piece. I don't feel like we're servicing everyone when we talk about customers. I think we've got residents, we've got people that are more important than that. So that's a piece that I keep banging in the back of my head here, that I don't hear right when I hear customers. I have to process that a little differently to make it work for me. So, but I'm grateful to be here and listen to this. I think it's a good exercise.
Good point. Don?
Enjoyed the experience. Glad that everybody had an opportunity to participate. It was good to have the chance to go through the priorities again after setting them a year ago. Found it to be easier and more comfortable to deal with that which we laid out last summer, and looking forward to the next phase on August 8th. Thanks for your leadership. I think it's helped us. Since I've been on the council, several times we've used a facilitator to help bring things out and keep us focused, and I think that's the way we should proceed in the future. I think we get more out of it. Greg or no single person has to worry about that, but can participate more fully by having that. So thanks for your skill.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Carol?
So I also want to thank everybody. I think we're moving in the right direction, and I feel we've grown a lot in a year, and we're going to continue to grow. I do, on Mike's point, I want to make sure that everyone here understands that we want to empower you to to evaluate and challenge current policies that may be old or antiquated, and relook at things and not just do things because that's what they were. One of the things that I always assess the difference between private sector and public sector is in the public-private sector, if there's a product and you say there's arrays of lines of, you've got marketing, operations, sales, if one of those rays of workers is not functioning, no one gets paid because the product fails. And in city government, if one of those rays of departments doesn't function, no one's paying attention because everyone still gets paid. And it's important that we change the way we look at the way we function, and customer service is our number one, and the customer is number one, and we have to make sure if a department is not functioning or there's policies or practices that are happening that are not or that are hindering the enhancement of our customer service, everyone needs to have a voice and speak up about it and not pretend and get in our silos. Because the world is changing, and it's important that we optimize our resources and, challenge antiquated policies or practices and look for opportunities for improvement.
Good comments. Good.
This is a great experience. Again, the only thing that I look forward to that wasn't here this year that we talked about last year was just, I think we're doing a good job. I believe that we understand what our constituents want from us. To Don's point earlier, we've been elected to represent them. On the other hand, if we come into this process with actual data from our residents and our employees, we're going to make better, more informed decisions. So I look forward to bringing that forward. Maybe even once we get this information back mid-year, revisiting the strategic plan. Is there anything that we're missing, or did we put too much credence in that one assumption or that belief? So I think we're making a lot of progress. I think the fact that it's publicized right now and it's transparent is great. But I would like to incorporate the voice of the people we represent and our employees into the process better.
Good. Those are all really helpful comments, and just like to ask any department head, if you would like to offer any comments, don't have to, but don't want to cut off any department heads if you would like to offer any.
Could I start with, I think everyone in this room comes to work every day to serve this community and do a great job.
Yes.
And echoing what Mike, Councilmember Dugan said is I think the department heads would really like to have overall direction, like they get out of this session from council, and know what the focus area is and what they want, what council wants to achieve, and then be given the flexibility and the trust to go out and develop a plan and bring it back if it needs to come back to council and get direction to move forward. And I think these types of sessions help sort of define some of those roles and develop that level of, hopefully that level of trust between the council and department heads and their staffs that they're doing the right thing and they're focused on the right thing. The frustration that some of the department heads might have that they're maybe hesitant to bring up is they all are really fully engaged. And they need to prioritize, and they need to push back on me and the council sometimes when their plate is too full. So we need to have reasonable expectations of what they can accomplish. This hiring thing, we all know it needs to be looked at and should be looked at. It's really when are we able to get to it in combination with all the other things that we're working on. So that's what we'll figure out.
Yeah. Good. Comments from any department head? Meredith?
For me, I think one of the major themes is the community engagement, the community outreach, the surveying, the education to the community on transparency. All of this is a much larger theme throughout, not just that one goal area. And to me, the question is, what's the best way to really implement that? Because the police department's doing their thing, the public works department's doing their thing. So, a lot of efforts are being made, but perhaps in a duplicated efforts or in a disjointed sort of fashion. So I would like to see some more unified approaches being developed in implementing these sort of in bulk packages rather than as one-offs.
Good. Chris?
Being fairly results-oriented like all of us are, I look at this list and I think, oh my goodness, it's overwhelming. And it's a little bit of, flying the plane and building it at the same time. And I appreciate the opportunity to let council set priorities, set policy, to give us the direction, then give us the resources that we're asking for, and let us go out there and execute. And I think we have some great opportunities with, there's some good asks that have been made through the technology processes and through our internal practices that we're looking for your support again to say, let that low-hanging fruit, let us take it and run off and be successful. And it's that differential between the setting the policy direction and then executing on that policy, and knowing that each of us really care for this community. It's amazing the amount of care and concern we have here. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, good comments. Okay.
I could echo that. Before all these comments came about, in my survey, the other comments, council members had different priorities. The best thing that could come out of this is there a prioritized plan for us to deliver? That's
Yeah.
really what we ask for.
Good. Okay, so as my goal as facilitator on August 8th, I will help the council reach your tier 1 and tier 2 so that the staff knows what your direction is. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here facilitating today. Please leave those there. Your comments are very helpful, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.